The moment settled into a comfortable, ambient silence, creating a brief pause before the interaction could begin. Everything felt poised, waiting for the next word to break the quiet. A gentle voice finally cut through the stillness, offering a polite and hesitant address to whomever was nearby. The subsequent exchange quickly became one of unexpected enthusiasm. The conversation took an odd turn, centered first on a mini-fridge, leading to a sudden question about the item's purpose. Before much could be established, the person speaking then presented what appeared to be a beer. Following the unexpected presentation of the beverage, an expression of sincere appreciation settled over them, signaling a momentary peace amid the conversation's strange turns. The atmosphere hung suspended for a beat, allowing the shared moment of surprise to settle before the emotional current shifted entirely. Suddenly, the previous quiet enthusiasm shattered as a burst of unrestrained joy erupted from one character. An ecstatic outburst declared how deeply they had missed another person, calling out their name with intense longing. However, the conversation quickly looped back to its initial oddity. They addressed the miniature refrigerator directly, inquiring about its age, receiving a strange and startling declaration it claimed to be 12 years old. Building on the strange discussion about its supposed age, attention immediately shifted to the object's diminutive size. An exclamation was made regarding how small it remained, with someone advising that it should be given more milk, before calling out a name Aaron. The peculiar situation prompted a sharp intervention. A bystander questioned the group, demanding to know if the small figure they were addressing was genuinely someone's daughter. Cornered by the implication, the character grew flustered and reacted defensively. They insisted that it was nothing more than a miniature refrigerator, an item they claimed to have simply found somewhere, thereby completely dismissing the notion that it could possibly be a daughter. The momentary panic of their defensive outburst soon gave way to sharp, biting jabs. The unseen individual suddenly accosted them with questions about professional capability, implying that they were understaffed and irresponsible. They then offered a seemingly helpful directive, telling the character to simply treat the girl as a new employee. A noticeable pause settled over the conversation. The character hesitated, a long breath of contemplation filling the space as if weighing their next words or dealing with overwhelming emotional exhaustion. The accusation finally erupted, fueled by incredulity. A forceful declaration suggested that no amount of adorable charm could possibly validate the claim that such a girl belonged to Aaron. The tone instantly shifted from righteous anger to exaggerated sympathy. The speaker mused aloud about the sheer difficulty of having survived among terrible people, before wrapping them in a faux embrace and promising to take superb care of her as an older sister. When prompted for a name by the sweetly condescending voice, the little girl quietly revealed her identity, Kana. The supposed big sister's compliments continued, first admiring Kana's pretty name. But the sweetness was swiftly undercut by a peculiar shift in topic. The speaker suddenly began to wonder about Kana's tolerance for alcohol, asking with apparent concern how many mugs of beer she thought she could actually manage in one single day. The peculiar shift in focus, discussing Kana's ability to handle a full day of beer, seemed to fade into the background for a moment. Suddenly, one person spoke up, suggesting they could cover 300 units and offering to pay for the task. After this brief transaction, another voice intervened, signaling that it was time for them to get back to work. The scene shifted, providing a look into the routine life of Captain Aaron. It was suggested that his days typically unfolded with a certain predictable structure. However, this quiet routine was shattered by a sudden outburst. Someone sharply commanded them to stop beating people for the sake of decency. The recipient, however, dismissed the concern with a casual, seemingly uninterested response. The disruptive tension from the previous incident eventually subsided, but the day's rhythm persisted. Starting his duties anew, he found himself heading into work and offered a polite greeting to the commander. Later, he approached someone with a matter of goods, casually asking to inspect the condition of some apples. Seeing that everything seemed satisfactory, he instructed the person to take about 10 of them and wished them a good day. As the morning advanced, his duty shifted. He began patrolling the local markets, ensuring that security remained stable throughout the castle grounds. His efforts were not unnoticed, and he received a thankful acknowledgement for his vigilance. However, the peaceful patrol took a sudden turn. He ran into a guard whose demeanor was clearly irritating, prompting an involuntary sigh of exasperation. The initial frustration of the encounter did not abate as a conversation quickly developed. One individual argued for restraint, suggesting that they simply leave the man alone, recalling that the guard's presence was actually beneficial, keeping troublemakers from wandering through the markets. However, this assertion was met with immediate disagreement. The tension in the air suddenly thickened, and an unexpected countdown echoed through the space 3. Suddenly, a voice, raw with desperation and fear, cried out. The speaker pleaded for mercy, throwing out the entirety of their meager possessions as if it were an absolute last resort. Before the desperation could completely consume the atmosphere, a sharp exclamation of utter shock pierced through the air, freezing all movement and attention. The sudden shock that had momentarily silenced the scene abruptly gave way to a sharp, accusatory warning. The authority figures immediately demanded goods, threatening severe consequences for any deception regarding coins. This intensity was quickly tempered by another character who tried to intervene, arguing gently that despite knowing the man was a smuggler, they should exercise some restraint. Amidst the rising tension, one of the crew members called out a name. Addressing the ship's captain directly, a moment of negotiation followed, leading to a resolution. The captain quickly agreed that they should take 300 coppers in exchange for releasing the accused man, allowing them to keep 100 pieces for themselves. A burst of celebratory cheering echoed through the area. Gratitude was quickly expressed, with someone loudly thanking the captain for their assistance in the matter. The mood shifted entirely, moving from pirate drama to military procedure. An official voice announced the necessity of identification checks and thorough inspections right at the outer entrance of the castle. The group found themselves suddenly halted by the rigid authority of the checkpoints. The necessary inspections and stringent procedures at the outer entrance were still in effect, casting a palpable atmosphere of strict control over the area. Despite the sense of formal authority, an official voice noted that surprisingly few people were passing through today. A heavy silence followed the announcement, drawing attention to the stillness of the massive courtyard as the tension lingered in the air. Suddenly, a sentimental phrase was uttered, suggesting that the beauty of the camellia flower remained untarnished by time. The reflective moment was sharply broken, when a question came, one that questioned whether Scar had arranged this particular meeting all over again. A swift warning followed, cautioning the other party against speaking certain names so carelessly. The recipient of the warning dismissed the caution with a sharp exhalation, only to immediately demand that the other person cease their evasiveness and state clearly what they truly wanted from this encounter. The intense demands for clarity were momentarily suspended, replaced by a far more urgent concern. A critical warning surfaced regarding the area. It was reported that Cascadic had recently seen an alarming surge of outsiders appearing in its borders. More detailed intelligence confirmed the growing threat, noting that many of these new arrivals were subtly posing as ordinary merchants. However, behind their mundane facades, they were engaged in increasingly suspicious activities. The sheer depth of the problem was crystallized when a crucial letter bearing the seal of the kin was presented, demanding immediate attention. The gravity of the intelligence settled over them like a shroud. The truth about the outsiders, revealed through that single document, marked a dramatic shift in their initial conversation, pointing away from mere personal conflict and toward an existential danger. The profound weight of the intelligence, the unsettling truth about outside forces settled over them, making their previous discussions feel meaningless. The sudden revelation hits with such force that it culminates in a collective intake of breath, marking an abrupt emotional climax. The tense atmosphere immediately breaks, shattered by a rush of frustrated urgency. One character yells out that they do not have time for nonsense. But just as the exasperation mounts, their attention snaps to something else entirely, a letter belonging to the Shadow King. The discovery completely redirects the focus of their immediate search. The shift in power dynamic is evident as a clear command is issued. They are instructed to return to a specific location and warn a certain individual, telling them to cease behaving immaturely. The message contains highly cryptic specifics, referencing the ring of the Mayan shadows, indicating that this object is central to their current predicament. This commanding tone immediately provokes a defensive reaction. The recipient dismisses the implication of childishness, retorting that the accuser should stop acting like an emotional drama queen and simply remove themselves from the situation, leaving their own immediate future hanging in the balance. After the intensity of the confrontation faded, a more practical reality settled over them. The conversation shifted abruptly toward economics, with the declaration that if this remote location were to attract more outside visitors, it would significantly help boost the local economy. He pointed out that there had indeed been a sudden surge of outsiders recently present in Kasatic Amatic. This statement was met with immediate, palpable confusion from those listening. The speaker's attention then turned to a person named Quarter. A sharp, commanding tone was used, urging the individual to rise up and get back on their feet. The declaration was resolute. It was high time for everyone present to get back to work and generate some money, suggesting a new focus on commerce and necessity. Just as the weight of necessity settled upon them, demanding a return to commerce and productive routine, an abrupt shout sliced through the air. It was a forceful interruption that commanded everyone present to halt whatever they were doing. The sudden command caused a ripple of confusion among the onlookers, leaving only questioning sounds in its wake. Another individual then approached, offering a casual but overly saccharine greeting for the evening. This seemingly friendly demeanor quickly soured when the recipient spoke of the person as a strange and worrisome figure, suggesting they reeked strongly of impending trouble. The tension ratcheted up further, with one person suggesting that immediate action should be taken, perhaps by making an arrest. In the midst of this rising conflict, a familiar voice called out the name de Lenoir, announcing his unexpected return to the scene. Just as the intensity of the moment reached a fever pitch, a familiar voice cut through the air, drawing attention back to the man who had unexpectedly returned. A woman then stepped forward, formally introducing him, detailing that he was Captain de Lenoir, newly assigned from the powerful Mozart Trading Company and currently based in the Kasatic region. She explained that she had only encountered him recently during a routine identification check. The ensuing exchange was laced with overt admiration. One person quickly recognized the captain's rank, while another couldn't help but swoon over his appearance, comparing him to a true knight due to his striking handsomeness. The praise continued, painting a picture of tireless effort, with the characters acknowledging and commending him for his dedication to working hard day and night. The group continued to observe the figure, their collective attention settling on him as more conversation took place around them. The atmosphere shifted as the address changed, with someone suggesting that they should henceforth refer to him by a new title. The suggestion was quickly accepted, solidifying a certain dynamic between them. Others chimed in, also complimenting his admirable character and decency. But the moment of pleasantries was abruptly shattered by a sharp call. The name de Lenoir echoed across the space, immediately drawing all focus back to him. There was an undeniable urgency in the voice, as the speaker directly questioned whether he possessed the specific items that had been handed over during their last encounter. Responding instantly to the pointed question, an explosive exclamation of surprise burst forth, followed by a sharp gasp that suggested immediate disbelief and panic. The tension momentarily broke into a period of unexpected gratitude. The character expressed immense thanks, noting that a particular remedy or item helped them sleep incredibly soundly. This moment of reprieve was quickly punctuated by another, more dismissive utterance. The atmosphere immediately thickened with renewed peril. The character pleaded desperately, imploring the captain not to confiscate a specific item. They argued that they were no thief and had every right to keep what was theirs. Ignoring the personal pleas, the focus shifted abruptly to institutional protocol. A figure reminded everyone that despite any other matter at hand, they still needed to thoroughly inspect all incoming goods and confirm that nothing suspicious was being brought into the area. The pressure continued, demanding confirmation that the inspection process was proceeding correctly. A nervous denial followed, affirming loudly and unequivocally that there were no suspicious items to be found. Just when the atmosphere settled, following a loud affirmation that nothing suspicious remained, a dramatic shift occurred. One figure suddenly spoke out, making an outrageous comment about paying much more if certain things were found, followed by a look of utter disbelief from another party. The surprise quickly solidified into a specific, chilling discovery. A hand pointed out something indelible and shocking, the sudden revelation of a tattoo. A wave of exasperation washed over the scene. The characters were utterly bewildered, questioning what exactly was happening before a desperate plea rose up. A call went out specifically for Captain, pleading for help and urgently commanding attention to the unsettling detail they had just uncovered. The gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air, drawing all focus to the mysterious mark that had just been exposed. Time seemed to suspend itself, leaving the characters trapped in a tense silence, staring into an unknown future. Breaking the intense, suspended silence of the moment, their gaze dropped instantly to the foreground. The appalling scene that greeted them was a sight of sheer decay. Piles of goat carcasses lay scattered across the ground in truly horrible condition. The smell must have been overwhelming, as every surface was riddled with rot and the crawling presence of maggots. It became terrifyingly clear that not only was the meat unusable, but the sheer volume of decaying material threatened to ruin the wagon itself. The immediate shock of discovery gave way to deep suspicion. A challenge was issued, forcing the characters to confront one another and demanding an explanation for the other's presence. The abruptness of the accusation caused a sharp, startled exclamation to ripple through the air. Meanwhile, one character took a moment to study their counterpart, clearly forming a definitive, if unspoken, judgment about the person's true nature. The character finally launched into a long explanation, detailing the misfortune of their journey. They revealed that the butcher who had been assisting them recently passed away due to an accident. This tragedy forced the individual to trek all the way there with every single animal they possessed, leading them through layers of elaborate excuses, one moment declaring it unfortunate circumstances, and another dismissing any such pity by claiming their overwhelming generosity. After the long outpouring of excuses and misfortunes, a wave of relief washes over the atmosphere. The moment seems to settle into a calm acknowledgement, followed by clear signals that the path ahead is open. With a flourish, the destination proclaims its grandeur. This is Kassadek. However, the sudden welcome is immediately met with utter disbelief. A voice questions the proclamation of Kassadek's existence, quickly dismissing it as preposterous before leveling a sharp and scathing insult at the protagonist. The disbelief only fuels a rising rage. The character who questioned the welcome prepares to unleash pure malice, declaring that they will utterly transform this beautiful location, ripping it down and rebuilding it into something nothing but hell. The lingering heat of their sheer malice hadn't quite dissipated, but the focus immediately shifted. A new voice cut through the tension, questioning the very presence of someone named de Lenoir, while another speaker murmured a passing thought about whether he held any particular affection for high places. The conversation then pivoted, shifting gears from personal conflict to geopolitical worry. An assessment of the surrounding region revealed a disturbing pattern. There had been an undeniable surge of outsiders within Kassadek. Intelligence sources warned that many of these newcomers were masking their identities as mere merchants, but they were simultaneously engaged in deeply suspicious activities. The mood tightened considerably as one character issued a direct, icy warning to de Lenoir. The threat was palpable in these harsh medieval times. One had to be meticulously careful because the choices presented were brutal, either remaining utterly innocent or facing a very grim end by the noose. The weight of the prior warnings, the perilous nature of existence, and the choice between absolute innocence or certain doom by the noose felt heavy in the air. Yet, suddenly, a palpable shift occurred. A confused realization seemed to bubble up, causing one character to utter a stunned question. The atmosphere of danger and political dread was instantly replaced by sheer disbelief. As the revelation dropped, Charlotte had asked for a date with him. Further clarification revealed the dark nature of this outing. She hadn't asked him to merely spend time together, but had instead invited him to watch an execution with her. This development struck a chord, making one character marvel at Charlotte's initiative and agency. However, the shock was soon followed by bitter lamentations from another individual who felt that even someone perceived as dull enough to date could manage it, while he remained completely barred from such opportunities. The conversation spiraled into rhetorical absurdity, leading one person to question the very premise of it. Was observing an execution truly something that could be viewed as a kind of festival or enjoyable outing? After the philosophical rabbit hole of the conversation, which questioned whether witnessing an execution could ever constitute a form of enjoyable festival, a sudden, disruptive burst of energy managed to yank attention away from their moral quandaries. The weight of judgment lifted abruptly. A character suddenly exclaimed, observing the people around them with an air of incredulity and slight disdain. They remarked how backward the culture seemed, before quickly switching focus entirely to food. The individual mused aloud about offering a piece of pie, which had been baked by their mother, as a thoughtful little gift. The mention of the pie immediately seized everyone's attention. One person urgently asked for a moment, calling out to another character named Brig. The gravity of the situation deepened as this person began repeating and emphasizing the phrase about the cake specifically, the confection that had been baked by his mother. The lingering warmth of the conversation regarding mother's cakes and fond memories was instantly punctured by a harsh, sharp question. A voice questioned if he really meant that foul-smelling fish pie. The sudden shift in topic left everyone momentarily stunned, leaving only a confused sound hanging in the air. Someone immediately jumped into defense, exclaiming how strange it was that anyone could find an aversion to fish pie. They passionately explained that this dish was incredibly popular throughout the Brington Kingdom, portraying it as a culinary staple. The argument quickly escalated into playful mockery when they added a rhetorical jab, suggesting critics were lacking basic sense organs. However, the rebuttal was immediate and brutal. The challenger declared the dish an utter abomination that reeked and tasted like baked dung. This harsh dismissal then quickly turned into a personal jab, accusing the defender of being overly mean. The lingering sting of the harsh accusations finally settled, replaced by a sudden wave of concern. A voice cut through the tension, immediately questioning if Werman was all right. When prompted, a strained affirmative confirmed that he was passing through the moment. The conversation quickly pivoted, bringing forth a vivid memory connected to the camellia flower. This beautiful image served as a poignant reminder, followed by a determined declaration that something could never happen. As the moment hung suspended in unresolved tension, the scene gracefully faded, signaling a dramatic shift away from the immediate aftermath. The narrative then transitioned to a more intimate exchange. A character named Scar cornered the other, conveying that he seemed compelled by fate to find them. The recipient acknowledged this deep connection while advising them on making plans concerning Brig. This brief but charged conversation concluded with an energetic acknowledgement directed toward a captain. Following the charged farewell and the energetic acknowledgement directed toward a captain, an undeniable shift fell over the atmosphere. The sense of foreboding plans concerning Brig lingered in the air, only to be shattered by a sudden presence that signaled not departure, but unexpected return. A warm, knowing voice cut through the charged tension. The words spoken carried a profound sense of history, addressing someone with the familiarity of an old friend whose arrival had clearly been anticipated. The recipient responded, bringing up the weight of their shared promise. They recalled an oath that bound them together. One was destined to rule Kassadok from the obscurity of the shadows, while the other's role was to keep watch in the light. This exchange cemented a deeply rooted hierarchy of responsibility, as the speaker claimed the mantle of Scar, the shadow of Kassadok, solidifying his self-appointed identity within their powerful secret world. With the weighty promise of their shared destiny still hanging in the air, a sudden urgency resurfaced. It became clear that the time to fulfill their ancient oath was drawing near. However, this serious moment was immediately derailed by a sharp and dismissive taunt, shattering the fragile tension with a casual inquiry about life itself. The immediate drama abruptly pivoted into a far more mundane, petty conflict. One figure reacted with extreme offense, demanding to know why they had been interrupted while eating. This initial anger soon gave way to targeted insults aimed at the other's appearance, specifically calling out their hat as quite pathetic. The criticism of fashion escalated quickly, with one person complaining vehemently that the other was wearing something inappropriate. They dramatically accused the figure of misunderstanding the item's nature, demanding its immediate return from their companion. The conflict reached a peak as the demanding figure issued a harsh command, insisting that the other immediately remove the offending garment. The final exchange of the moment saw the recipient feigning deep confusion, questioning what exactly constituted a varsity jacket. The argument left them hanging on this seemingly trivial detail, leaving the true source of their stylistic dispute unexplained. But the lingering frustration from a seemingly trivial style debate quickly dissolved, giving way to intense confrontation. One figure's outburst ripped through the air, accusing the opponents of being nothing more than wannabe vigilantes and questioning their supposed title as the Shadow. A sharper voice immediately commanded them to stop engaging in these childish games, leaving another person suddenly stammering out a desperate, unheard plea. The argument suddenly shifted into a highly conspiratorial territory. A voice reminded the group of critical details mentioned within an official letter, specifically warning about suspicious activities carried out by recent outsiders in Kassadok. The speaker's tone dripped with cold assurance, stating that this development was nothing other than exactly what they had expected all along. A heavy, tense silence blanketed the area, allowing the full implications of their exchange, the warnings and expectations, to sink deep into every person's mind. The full extent of the danger was then revealed. These individuals had been secretly gathering, meeting every single night, always far away from any place where they could be seen. The lingering tension from the revelation of these secret meetings hung heavy in the air. A palpable dread permeated the location, as if the weight of impending disaster was building rapidly. An overwhelming sense suggested that something massive and dangerous was about to unfold, prompting immediate calls for stricter security measures to be implemented across the board. The rising tension soon erupted into open confrontation. A forceful challenge was issued, questioning the right of the opposing party to be present. Before any further exchange could happen, a sudden cry of pain cut through the air, signaling an unexpected physical attack. A warning was immediately given, advising the character to remain out of danger while the guards handled all necessary protections. Despite this counsel, a minor accident occurred, marked only by an audible sound of discomfort. The conversation shifted drastically to personal concerns. One person expressed surprise regarding the other's lack of engagement at their usual job site, questioning their professional commitment. A deeper worry emerged as another individual mentioned that Jackson had been actively searching for them, prompting a moment of uncertainty about whether they would be all right. The gravity of the situation escalated when a realization dawned. It turned out Father was also seeking their whereabouts. With the gravity of their situation and the fact that multiple key figures were already searching for them, a hasty departure became inevitable. After a barrage of final words, promising to reconnect another time, one character quickly gathered everyone together, signaling it was time to move out. The rushed farewells were punctuated by decisive acknowledgments, urging them onward with urgency. As the immediate danger receded into a low hum, the seriousness of their path ahead settled over them. It was as if they paused to acknowledge the enormous shift in their circumstances, the understanding that something profoundly significant was inevitably about to happen. The realization of their precarious position led to a shared understanding. The choice, it seemed, was not between good and bad, but between confronting unnecessary risk versus proceeding with guarded caution, choosing the path that offered safety above all else. The shared realization of choosing safety over unnecessary risk hung heavy in the air. Every instinct demanded vigilance, and for a long moment, nothing moved, only anticipation echoed within their minds. They found themselves caught in a profound, watchful stillness. The silence was not empty, but rather thick with untold secrets and the palpable weight of an inevitable encounter about to unfold. Suddenly, the quiet tension broke. A voice challenged their presence with an undeniable question. Yet, before anyone could process the implications of that challenge, a simple declaration cut through the air: they were indeed who they claimed to be. The immediate confusion gave way to recognition. A familiar voice exclaimed the passing of time since a last meeting, while another shouted out an enthusiastic greeting. Names began to surface in rapid succession: Dallas, known by his title as the Executioner, and Ted, who was identified as his son. The reappearance of these figures instantly reshaped the gravity of their careful retreat. The overwhelming drama of their re-encounter begins to settle, but the stillness is suddenly broken. A voice interrupts the tension, exclaiming how much fancier his armor now looks than it once did. He responds with only a brief, faint laugh. Shifting the focus to a quieter moment, someone presents them with a small collection of apples. The gesture is tender and carries an unspoken message of gratitude, prompting him to remind his son that thanks should be voiced. The conversation then turns to the setting itself. A quiet observation is made, noting that despite any changes, this house still retains its signature somber and grim atmosphere. The exchange concludes with deep appreciation for the trouble that was dealt, accompanied by an invitation to find a place to sit. However, this gratitude is quickly dismissed, as he reassures them that there were no worries necessary since the apple offered was free all along. The conversation, having drifted from the casual exchange of gifts and assurances that no worry was necessary, soon pivoted to a far more serious matter. A quiet observation was made, drawing attention to the fact that she had captured 6 individuals designated for execution. Hearing this, a slight air of impressed surprise crossed the speaker's face, as they noted that the captured were apparently members of the renowned Lone Wolves gang from Karzan. Yet, Before any further gravity could settle in the atmosphere, the acknowledgement was quickly dismissed with a profound shrug, suggesting it was not a significant matter at all. The tension surrounding the gang members was soon broken by a sudden shift of subject. A remark pointed out how much older Ted had become, sparking a knowing exchange between the characters who found it surprising how quickly youth could pass into adulthood. Finally, the conversation transitioned entirely into business. A document was presented, identified as a payment from Nova the advance fee for an upcoming job. This marked a temporary pause in their tense meeting, setting the stage for whatever high stakes awaited them next. The conversation, which had momentarily settled into the sterile language of contracts and payments, abruptly pivoted. The discussion shifted to Lord Fulputz's attendance. Placing an immediate spotlight on high expectations, someone made it clear that the recipient would need to deliver their absolute best technique. Acknowledging the weight of this expectation, one person simply confirmed they understood. The assurance that the request would be met was immediately followed by another, calmer statement, guaranteeing that she would indeed receive everything she had asked for. But before the discussion could settle, a new topic arose: family succession. An individual named Ted Thmi that was introduced into the conversation, expected to begin preparing for taking over the considerable weight of the family business. Hearing this plan unfold, another character raised an eyebrow at the reality, observing that he seemed remarkably close to the age needed for such a monumental shift. The conversation then took a reflective turn, drawing parallels between lives. It was recalled that the path of a simple farmer's son is often to grow up and follow in the same stable footsteps on the land. The narrative, however, darkened with implication. The seemingly simple pattern of lineage proved fragile when the topic shifted to a destiny born of darker professions. It was stated plainly that it was only natural for the son of an executioner to inevitably follow in his father's deeply ingrained footsteps. Yet, as the fate of his bloodline was discussed, a genuine conflict rippled through him. Despite understanding the weight of expectation, and palpable unease settled over him regarding the prospect of passing down such a demanding and unforgiving profession. The weight of his words carried the sting of societal judgment, as he had to admit that this profession was one universally regarded with disdain and contempt. The confession hung heavy in the air, creating a palpable silence. The deep stain of their lineage and the accompanying shame left him suspended in a painful moment of true self-doubt. What path would he truly choose? The weight of his lineage and self-doubt was almost too much to bear. He finally lashed out, dropping a devastating revelation about the core reason why his wife had abandoned him, before trailing off into an abrupt, seemingly unrelated plea for attention. Despite the harsh atmosphere, a thread of connection remained. A character conveyed profound gratitude and acknowledged that this person did not regard them with the collective disdain shown by everyone else present. When challenged on why they should feel obliged to show kindness, the retort was dismissive, yet ultimately revealing. They countered that speaking with this particular individual offered a rare moment of genuine conversation, far superior to any mundane topic. The intense conversation was suddenly interrupted by another voice. This person apologized for the distraction, mentioning hands, and voiced disbelief at how someone who had been such a hardworking young man could have fallen so deeply into criminality. After the intense conversation regarding moral failings and a sudden spiral into criminality, a sobering realization settled over them that no one, regardless of their position or history, was entirely immune to committing a crime. The mood shifted dramatically when one individual, seemingly accepting the premise of moral decay, offered a provocative comment, humorously hinting that should they ever become involved in criminal activities, they hoped for an equally clean ending. The person listening accepted the dare with an air of polished confidence, assuring them that if such a day arrived, they would not only oblige, but also showcase their very finest techniques in carrying out the deed. The banter escalated rapidly. The challenge was issued directly that if the other party ever committed a crime, they would insist on being the one to execute them. Yet, in response, the first character merely offered a slight laugh of dismissal, calling the opponent an overly clever little brat, while nonetheless agreeing with the dangerous premise. After the initial banter and agreement to such a dangerous premise, the first character delivers their final words. With cold certainty, they depart, leaving behind an ominous warning that the paths of both characters are destined to cross again at the execution. The air hangs heavy with unspoken tension. The immediate conflict has ended, but the threat lingers, a palpable weight settling over the characters as they navigate their separation. However, the threat is far from over. It becomes increasingly difficult to maintain their covert lives and movements because of a specific individual known only by the moniker Scar, who is constantly observing every single action taken by the main characters. The omnipresent threat from Scar meant that even massive plots, such as the recent ambush planned by Quitan just outside the castle walls, were never safe from turning against them. These attempts at grand schemes, no matter how elaborate, had invariably fallen short. Recognizing the failure of their past strategies, a dangerous thought surfaced. Perhaps it was time for them to make a decisive move. However, before any action could be taken, a sharp warning cut through the air, demanding absolute quiet and focus. As the tension settled, a piece of crucial information dropped into their plans. An execution was set to take place at the main plaza in just a few days. Building upon the knowledge of the impending execution in the main plaza, a decisive plan immediately crystallized. It became clear that this unforeseen chance could be leveraged. They intended to strike during the chaos and obtain what was referred to as the heart. The proposal met with immediate, enthusiastic agreement from the surrounding members. Yet, even as they pledged their loyalty to the objective, one figure subtly diverted the conversation, voicing a tactical question, confirming whether the individual they were observing was merely asleep or truly dead. The tension stretched, and a soft sound of hesitation filled the air, suggesting that an answer was imminent but not yet forthcoming. Just as the air hung heavy with mutual anticipation, suggesting a major reveal was just around the corner, an authoritative voice abruptly shatters that moment of quiet. A clear, urgent warning echoes through the space, reminding everyone present that only 5 more minutes remained for the captain. The urgent warning about the remaining minutes for the captain hangs heavy in the air, a ticking clock against the weight of anticipation. As this critical tension continues to build, the scene abruptly shifts focus, transporting the narrative to a grim, monumental location, the Casatic Plaza, on the very day marked for an execution. The camera pans across the vast, intimidating space of the plaza, setting every detail into focus. The sense of fate and inescapable judgment settles over the crowd, making the ground itself feel charged with electricity. Just as the atmosphere reaches its unbearable peak, a sudden and forceful outburst rings out. It is an exclamation of pure effort, an audible gasp that signals the start of explosive action, confirming that the confrontation has finally erupted. The spectacle intensifies, marked by a collective cry of shock. This second exclamation mirrors the sudden shift in power and reveals an overwhelming display before their eyes, an event so dramatic that it forces every single onlooker to stare, completely caught off guard. Amidst the lingering echo of that overwhelming spectacle, the mood suddenly drops into a far more casual register. One individual remarks on how impressively skilled the little mage is, quickly following up with an immediate, simple request for another serving of beer, which they receive with a clear sigh of relief. The gathering continues with an even softer touch of hospitality. Another presence offers refreshments, suggesting that everyone should enjoy the strawberry jam spread on fresh bread alongside a glass of wine. However, this quiet domesticity soon splinters into petty conflict. One character expresses their deep exasperation regarding the necessity of having to help out at all. This quickly draws the ire of a nearby individual, who sharply warns that any attempt to steal the delicious bread will not be tolerated. The tension over the stolen bread quickly subsides, replaced by overwhelming commercial success. A delighted voice voices appreciation for their brilliant knack for pairing wine with fresh bread and jam, declaring this character a genius for the massive customer influx. Yet, barely cresting on such high praise, that sentiment is abruptly cut short by a sharp, dismissive sound of disdain. The wave of good fortune continues unabated, proving that even Kanna's ice-cold beer is incredibly popular. One character reflects on the unexpected success, seemingly whispering to themselves about how they always had confidence in others' ability to make things work. A skeptical voice then interjects, offering only a weak and highly doubtful acknowledgement of everything that has been said about their booming success. The conversation takes a sharp turn into smug intellectualism, as one character tries to explain the success by referencing associative marketing, while simultaneously suggesting that nobody else could possibly understand the concept. This is followed by an even more audible puff of disdain, culminating in a stark, chilling warning about those filthy individuals who sometimes dip their bread into the blood of executed criminals. The chilling, disdainful warning about those who mingle their hands with the blood of criminals hangs heavily in the air. But suddenly, the atmosphere snaps, jarringly pulling focus away from matters of life and death. The tension dissipates into a highly personal confrontation as one voice challenges Aaron about his motives for taking Kana, only to be met with an unbelievably casual explanation that he merely desired cold beer. The immediate attempt to dismiss the situation as nothing more than a trivial craving is quickly countered. The speaker rejects this minimal reasoning, asserting that taking Kana was far from being motivated by such a simple, momentary whim. The accusation grows deeper, shifting from the immediate event to the character's entire nature. It is pointed out that interest or care for anyone else seems to be an exceptionally rare occurrence in his life. This observation, dripping with disappointment and finality, leads only to a dismissive sound, signaling the end of any meaningful dialogue. Following the devastating finality of those words, where all meaningful dialogue seemed to have reached a cold, empty standstill, the character refuses to accept the accusation easily. Instead, he adopts an air of guarded skepticism, leaning back and challenging the premise with a simple statement that suggests things are not settled so quickly. A profound silence settles over the moment, allowing the sheer weight of the preceding confrontation and the character's defiance to hang heavily in the air. Suddenly, drawing everyone's attention and breaking the emotional tension, a soft, gentle meow pierces the quiet atmosphere. The focus instantly shifts from the tense argument to something small and immediate. This simple sound triggers a profound shift in memory. The character begins recounting a distant past, recalling the time he took in and raised an abandoned stray cat on the streets many years ago. He pauses, a poignant look crossing his face, realizing that this seemingly insignificant creature was a startling echo of someone else, a reminder of a life long ago. The gentle recall of the stray cat's image, that poignant echo of a lost life, was abruptly shattered. Two distinct voices cut through the quiet contemplation, startling him with sharp questions regarding Aaron and calling out for Captain. A mixture of exasperation and confusion followed. The assembled group questioned why they were forced into a gathering when their schedules clearly designated a day of rest, exchanging incredulous glances about the supposed mission to sell simple goods like bread and alcohol. However, the casual tone vanished instantly. One individual stepped forward, delivering highly concerning intelligence that hinted at danger lurking nearby. The instructions were clear. They were now placed into an undercover role, and every member was ordered to remain constantly vigilant, reporting immediately on any sign of suspicious activity. The sudden realization of their new undercover assignment hung heavy in the air. However, a second voice quickly brought them back down to earth, expressing palpable confusion. The speaker questioned the parameters of this deep cover role, pointing out that if they were supposed to be working together, it was incredibly surprising that only two individuals themselves and Poole seemed to be present, leaving the rest unaccounted for. A moment passed, allowing the initial shock to settle, before an observation was casually made. The focus shifted to Brigg, who seemed completely preoccupied with his current charades, engrossed in charming Charlotte and making all the fuss over her. The conversation then pivoted sharply back to mission-critical intelligence. A quick, decisive message was relayed. There was no question that the target individual was not sleeping in their room at all. After absorbing the critical intelligence, the undeniable confirmation that their target individual was far from resting in their private quarters, a single realization washed over them. A slow acknowledgement of the depth and immediacy of the situation settled upon them. The atmosphere hung heavy with the weight of that vital information, a tense silence preceding any shift in focus. The mission details seemed to momentarily suspend all other thoughts, but before the professional tension could fully settle, a casual voice broke through. The conversation abruptly pivoted away from classified intelligence, pulling focus instead to an entirely different person, calling out a name that sounded familiar yet jarring in the charged air. Just as the tension of the classified meeting threatened to settle into professional silence, an abrupt and casual voice shattered the atmosphere. It called out a name, Aaron, pulling all focus away from the serious discussions and redirecting it toward a single individual. A harsh whisper followed, demanding to know why the person was found in such an inappropriate or compromising location. Deflecting the immediate accusation, The speaker explained that the current gathering of people seemed genuinely anxious. Their actions were rooted in a desire to steady and calm those who were visibly distressed. The tone of soothing reassurance continued, as the speaker addressed the assembled group with gentle words meant to alleviate all lingering fears and worry. The speaker then escalated the sense of grandeur, dramatically stating that their father had the experience of decapitating more than 100 heads, an unbelievable testament to his skill and practice. Having established the dark legacy of his lineage with stories of bloody feats, the speaker's demeanor softened into a dangerously patronizing tone. He seemed determined to soothe any fear, warning that there was no need for worry. Indeed, he assured the person before him that passing into the afterlife would be instantaneous and completely painless, concluding his lecture with an unsettlingly gentle acknowledgement. In response to these disarming words, a choked sound escaped the figure, a low, muffled noise that suggested struggle or profound distress. The speaker, growing increasingly perplexed by the minimal resistance, demanded to know what the other side was attempting to communicate. When met only with another unintelligible grunt, his frustration surfaced, leading him to loudly declare that he could not comprehend a single word being spoken. A decisive shift swept over the atmosphere. The speaker gathered his thoughts, finally declaring that the time was up for all of them. A final command seemed to punctuate the tense silence, signaling the dramatic curtain call and leading into an inevitable confrontation. The air, already thick with unspoken tension from the previous declarations, suddenly combusted. The profound silence shattered completely as a chilling challenge was issued. It wasn't a threat, nor was it a negotiation. It was a brutal declaration of war, an outright command to start the carnage and carve out victories piece by piece. The words hung in the charged atmosphere, ringing out with a frightening inevitability. Every eye shifted toward the speaker, reading not just the challenge, but the sheer, unwavering confidence behind it. The stage was set. There was no turning back from the confrontation they had so desperately built up to. With that final, aggressive pronouncement, all hesitation vanished. The waiting ended, and the atmosphere snapped taut, transforming from a tense showdown into an open field of combat. An epic clash was imminent, guaranteeing that the fight promised would be far more devastating than anyone could have anticipated. Just as the moment peaked, right before the anticipated clash of steel and fury could ignite, the intense energy seemed to dissipate abruptly. The battlefield paused, not in defeat, but in profound stillness, forcing the characters' attention away from immediate action and toward a much deeper contemplation. The sudden void of activity allowed a deep, disorienting moment of silence to settle over the fighters. The gravity of their confrontation was momentarily superseded by a weighty historical thought. It brought to mind the history, specifically the concept that medieval executions were not merely acts of punishment, but perhaps something more complicated. A slow realization began to surface, painting a theoretical picture of the era's brutality. The narrative proposed that these public displays of violence might have served a strange, societal function, a desperate mechanism, through which the general populace could finally and violently release their most suppressed rage. As the masses vented their accumulated fury, the ruling class stood poised to harvest it. They were masters of turning sheer desperation into carefully curated performance, viewing these bursts of primal emotion merely as another political festival for show. The true purpose of the chaos, however, extended far beyond mere entertainment. It was a grand and brutal display designed solely to reinforce their authority and unshakable power. Furthermore, every gesture, every moment of controlled violence, served as an absolute declaration of who held the strings in this society. And as the smoke cleared and the celebratory frenzy died down, it became sickeningly clear that this particular event was far more than usual. It held a significance that hinted at immense danger, setting the stage for something truly monumental. The magnitude of the situation became horrifyingly clear. The group they had apprehended were not merely common criminals. They were ruthless gang members responsible for brutal murders committed against high-ranking nobles within Karzan itself. This shocking revelation only heightened the political stakes, given that Lord Fulputz had been planning an official diplomatic engagement with Karzan at this very moment. The irony of the current situation was palpable. They were ostensibly assembled for what should have been a purely diplomatic function, yet the air surrounding them felt thick with anything but peaceful negotiations. It carried an undercurrent that hinted at something far more punitive than polite discourse. A rising sense of panic filled the space, causing one character to desperately warn against any potential missteps. Another dismissed the concern by pointing out that if they were to analyze the gravity of the situation purely logically, it felt undeniably like something terrible was surely about to occur. The intense weight of impending doom, felt moments ago, abruptly dissolves. A deep sense of confusion takes hold as one character questions what exactly they are witnessing. A sharp exclamation rings out, marking a sudden, undeniable moment of alarm and surprise. The rising tension is shattered by a loud, aggressive shout. The accuser confronts someone nearby, demanding to know what the newcomer has been doing in that specific location. The raw confrontation hangs heavy in the air. Amidst the surprise and conflict, a profound silence settles over the area, leaving everyone to absorb the meaning of those sudden words. The profound silence, built up by the raw confrontation, shatters instantly. A gasp of shock rips through the air as a horrified cry rings out, followed immediately by another panicked exclamation when they notice something terrifying lying nearby. It was a bomb. The horrific realization hits them all at once. The threat was unmistakable. It was a bomb. Screams of sheer panic erupt as desperate warnings are shouted to run for their lives. The frantic cries only deepen the sense of dread, quickly followed by a devastating realization they had not merely stumbled into danger, they had been expertly ambushed. As the sound of panicked footsteps echoes through the suddenly lethal environment, the tension reaches a suffocating peak. They stand frozen in the face of the inevitable blast, breath held captive by fear and adrenaline, waiting for the trigger that will shatter their world. The sudden cataclysm erupts in a chorus of agonizing screams. The shouts are frantic, filled with terror as the realization hits them all. Lord Fulputz is being blasted away by the sheer force of the explosion, sending waves of panic through the already unstable environment. Yet, amidst the swirling chaos, one character observes the departing figure and mutters that Lord Fulputz reminds him of a bird. To his disbelief, they see him truly taking flight, soaring through the wreckage. The observation quickly turns to panic as urgent commands are shouted. Move immediately. Survival depends on speed. As the dust begins to settle, a more measured conversation takes place. Concern is raised regarding security protocols, reminding them that the outer guards are responsible for maintaining order. They ponder the serious ramifications should the Lord perish in this specific location. The weighty implication of the conversation hangs heavy in the air, forcing every remaining individual to pause and process the immense risk they are facing. The weighty implication of the conversation hangs heavy in the air, forcing every remaining individual to pause and process the immense risk they are facing. The tension finally breaks with a sudden, desperate cry, ringing out like a panicked question. If this is what awaits them, how could any one person possibly keep their wits? Yet, amidst the chaos of the moment, a different voice cuts through the panic. Admiration is paid to Dallas for his unwavering performance despite the surrounding destruction. He remains professionally focused and impressive in his execution of duty. He responds to the praise with a chilling detachment, clarifying that his actions are not based on skill or choice, but simply fulfill what is expected of him, the duties inherent to an executioner. However, this stark explanation only serves to fuel the skepticism of others. A questioning tone arises, making him consider if that simple statement truly suffices to explain his true commitment. The pressure of the moment compels him to reaffirm his stance with resolute certainty. He confirms that, regardless of the difficulty or implication, he shall proceed by fulfilling every single duty assigned to him, setting the stage for whatever devastating act must come next. The immense weight of that solemn promise settles over him. Having made his absolute commitment to fulfilling every duty, the moment crystallizes around his very identity. He is recognized, defined by the mantle he wears, the captain of the guards. The solemn weight of the captain's promise was instantly ripped apart by pure terror. A piercing cry announced their sudden peril, transforming the area into pandemonium. Shouts erupted as people scrambled and broke, desperately urging everyone to run from an unseen threat. Amidst the chaotic screams and panic, one figure managed to call out in frustration, demanding an explanation for the sudden onslaught. Yet, recognizing the severity of the situation, they quickly found their resolve, trying desperately to project a sense of calm reassurance into the rising tide of fear. The sense of responsibility forced the figure to act, their voice cutting sharply through the hysteria. They commanded the panicked masses to cease their frantic running, warning that such uncontrolled flight was not only foolish, but posed a grave danger to the children caught in the tumult. But even amidst the chaos and the desperate attempts to maintain order, a raw moment of purely human distress unfolded. A small child cried out for their mother, who quickly gathered them up, whispering soft promises of comfort and safety into their ear. But the pocket of quiet safety proved fleeting. The chaos that had been merely background noise now exploded into outright panic. Shouted warnings mixed with frantic pleas, someone urging caution and others demanding that people exit slowly from a particular direction. Amidst the general hysteria, the smaller conflicts flared up accusations over trivial matters, like being caught trying to steal a mere loaf of bread. The mounting disorder quickly escalated into aggressive confrontation. One individual, desperate to prevent a flight, cornered another figure, demanding to know where they intended to go. Amidst the shouting and confusion, a familiar name was called out in alarm. The focus momentarily shifted, as if confirming that everyone accounted for, making sure every member of their group was still present. The adrenaline began to fade, forcing them to switch gears from pure survival to tactical assessment. A critical question was asked had anyone observed a suspicious presence nearby. Responding to the query, there was noticeable hesitation. The memory of what constituted suspicious activity seemed hazy, making an immediate answer difficult for those around them. Finally, a crucial detail emerged from the confusion. They recalled seeing someone whose identity was obscured by a low hood, providing the only tangible thread of information in their desperate search for safety. Their fragile attempt to piece together the memory of the figure hidden beneath a deep hood led them to moments of shared disbelief. Both individuals seemed equally staggered, realizing that what they had witnessed might have been misinterpreted or even entirely impossible. As the confusion momentarily lifted, a far more critical realization swept through the group. It was stated plainly that the lady was once again making herself into the central target of whatever force lay waiting for them. The weight of this threat demanded an immediate, coordinated response. A single call cut through the tension, designating a specific team and signaling that preparations for battle needed to begin right then. Following the immediate call to action, the focus shifted instantly from preparation to pursuit. An urgent command echoed through the group, directing their attention and setting a relentless course directly after the suspect. The gravity of their mission was immediately felt. They understood that if they did not capture this suspect, the threat would escalate far beyond mere conflict, putting them all in danger from unseen enemies. With the stakes set so high, the group paused only long enough to assess their situation. A question of where the suspect might have fled hung in the air, demanding a careful calculation of potential locations. As if marking the end of their chance for a clear overview, the environment changed dramatically. The day was fading quickly, it was already completely dark. The sudden darkening of the environment did little to calm the rising anxiety. One voice began by reminding others of a past event, questioning if their memory was failing regarding Hans's previous escapes. The warning felt heavy, and another character quickly dismissed the concern, urging them not to speak so rashly. Just as the conversation settled into uneasy silence, a different piece of news was delivered, the encouraging message that Lord Fulputz had survived and was doing well. However, this relief immediately sparked skepticism. One person questioned whether his continued existence hinted at him possessing 9 lives. The momentary lift in spirits shattered with a grim announcement. The bad news arrived: one of the knights had been caught in an explosive blast and was confirmed dead. The weight of that loss hung heavily in the air. Hearing of the death, a deep sigh escaped the character. They voiced their long-held distrust, observing that these very knights had never proved reliable in times of true crisis. Despite the profound disappointment that had settled over them and the deep-seated distrust regarding the knights' reliability in a true crisis, they remained watchful as they surveyed their surroundings. A dry observation soon cut through the tense atmosphere, pointing out that this location seemed to harbor yet another unreliable figure. However, the conversation took a more personal turn when someone greeted them warmly, expressing pleasure at their shared presence. The question soon followed, showing immediate concern for the well-being of Aaron. The tension was momentarily broken by a sound of stifled laughter, making it clear that the entire situation they were in felt profoundly embarrassing. The teasing continued, with one person pointing out that the character always seemed battered and beaten. The jab escalated into outright disbelief, causing them to question whether their true status was even that of a noble knight. after enduring the barrage of disbelief and mockery regarding his true status. Finally, something must break within him. He lets down his guard. But before he can process that vulnerability, two shocking pieces of information drop like bombs. A powerful dark mage is responsible for their current predicament. The danger, however, does not end there. An even more insidious threat is unveiled: the possibility of a traitor hiding in plain sight among their own soldiers. Faced with these escalating crises, the external magical threat and the internal betrayal, a grave warning is issued, emphasizing that extreme caution must be maintained. The sheer weight of the truths revealed, stacked upon one another: the mage, the traitor. The warning leaves all those present reeling, unable to process the gravity of what they have just learned. The sheer weight of the truths revealed, stacked upon one another: the mage's secret, the traitor's deception, and the final ominous warning leaves all those present reeling. Amidst that stunned silence, a single, urgent voice pierces the tension, calling out an address meant only for the captain. The charged atmosphere hangs heavy in the air, trapping the gathered characters within a bubble of unresolved emotion and consequence. As the implications sink deeper, one of the characters visibly struggles against the pressure. A weary sound escapes them, a low sigh of resignation, or perhaps acute physical discomfort, suggesting that whatever truths were spoken have taken a profound toll. The heavy weight of the revelations and lingering physical strains finally prove too much to bear. With a guttural, agonizing cry, the character's resistance breaks in a sudden surge of pain. Gasping for breath, the character attempts to regain composure, staring out at their companions with deep confusion, as if questioning what exactly was happening around them. A sharp and dismissive voice cuts through the confusion, suggesting that their current turmoil is an overreaction considering they had barely endured a single blow. The argument instantly ratchets up in intensity, resulting in quick bursts of pain, sharp cries, and groans echoing off the surrounding environment. The taunting continues, delivered with infuriating casualness, making light of the painful exchange by implying that what they had briefly experienced was merely a momentary inconvenience. The mocking dismissal hangs heavy in the air, leaving a stark and tense silence to fill the space, signaling that the battle is far from over, only pausing for a breath before the next onslaught. The lingering silence, heavy with anticipation and mocking dismissal, is suddenly shattered by a startled cry. Attention snaps toward a distant figure, followed by an overt compliment acknowledging that person's remarkably keen sense of hearing. The moment passes, and the focus shifts from observation to environmental critique. With a loud complaint about the pitiful quality of the wall's construction, an individual attempts a forceful action against the structure. However, the poorly built wall offers no real resistance. With just a light shove, the flimsy material instantly gives way, crumbling down into small pieces like soft tofu. As the flimsy wall crumbled and disintegrated entirely, revealing what lay beyond, a sudden, overwhelming gasp echoed through the clearing. Standing in the ruins was someone utterly unknown to them all. The sheer magnitude of the force displayed by this mysterious figure was shocking. It was a monstrous, overwhelming display of power that surpassed anything they had anticipated facing. But amidst the awe of this power, a mocking taunt broke through. The figure questioned why they were displaying such perceived weakness. Intrigued and conflicted, they realized that this person was fundamentally different from the demonic entity we had faced outside the castle grounds. The pressure of the battle mounted quickly. The combatants stumbled, struggling to keep pace. With labored breaths and a deep cough, one felt that the limit was finally being reached. The moment hung heavy with despair. It felt as though defeat was inevitable, and they were truly on the verge of collapse. The crushing weight of despair seemed to press down on them, making every breath difficult. Amidst the mounting tension and sense of inevitable defeat, a series of strained coughing sounds punctuated the heavy silence, echoing deep fatigue. Attempting to break the agonizing silence, one of the characters challenged a companion, seeking assurance that they were actually able to grasp the sheer magnitude and gravity of the perilous situation unfolding around them. A palpable urgency filled the air as the speaker pressed their companion, demanding that they divulge every fragment of truth they knew. It was a desperate plea for words to flow out, no matter how difficult the effort proved to be. Suddenly, the truth erupted into the air with shocking force. The dark mage was revealed to be the true architect of this crisis, functioning as the mastermind behind all their suffering. A frantic outpouring followed, screaming that his sole obsession lay with the young lady's heart, a revelation so disgusting and unbelievable that it left the character reeling in absolute disbelief. The shock of the dark mage's true intentions still hung in the air, making every revelation difficult to process. Slowly, a realization dawned on them. Perhaps all that grand, terrifying malice was simply underpinned by something far more rudimentary, the basic, twitching survival instinct of a desperate individual. The observation suggested what an unusually straightforward motive this actually was. The investigation deepened, uncovering a tapestry of dangerous connections. The man was revealed to be tied to some dark demonic contract, one forged through the very magic of the dark mage. To complicate matters further, their current meeting point wasn't anywhere safe. It was situated within the notoriously lawless city known as Tirumba. After compiling this staggering amount of information, someone declared that enough was enough. The discussion continued, reducing the dark mage's monumental scheme to little more than a subcontractor arrangement with demons. But the most pressing question lingered: why did all of this require the young lady's heart? As if admitting ignorance was easier than facing the truth, one character offered vague nonsense about it, quickly followed by an attempt to backtrack and desperately plead for belief regarding these fragmented details. The intense argument regarding the mysterious cost associated with the young lady's heart abruptly ceased. With a sigh of final resignation, the antagonist conceded defeat, deciding that due to the cooperative effort shown by the group, they would allow them to live. An order was then given to their subordinates to take custody of the spared individual. In the sudden wave of relief, a profound sense of gratitude washed over the group as they reacted to the unexpected reprieve. The tension that had gripped them seemed to lift instantly, with the group congratulating one another for having spoken out and seeking help. The sheer danger they had navigated made the relief feel almost unbelievable. Having survived the immediate threat, their attention quickly shifted back to analysis. The conversation confirmed that the so-called generous little brother was indeed a dark mage, and they noted the rampant behavior of his subordinates, who seemed far from disciplined. However, even as they pieced together these volatile details, one question persisted: what exactly was the connection between all this chaos and the young lady? A direct call-out rings through the space, using formal titles. The speaker seems to be urgently searching for a captain, acknowledging their presence with clear direction. The atmosphere then shifts, settling into a moment of relaxed observation. One character muses aloud about the pleasant quality of the night, seeming to find beauty in their immediate surroundings. The conversation subtly shifts again, turning more personal. Concern is voiced when someone questions another individual quarter about the fact that they seem to have slept throughout the entire day. Following the questioning of Quarter's constant need to sleep, one voice became intensely critical, stating that such excessive slumber was a genuine concern. The captain, however, quickly countered this observation, asserting that any judgment on his abilities or commitments was unwarranted. As the tension of their disagreement lingered, the conversation began to shift again. Someone tried to redirect the focus, introducing a curious piece of information that seemed designed to capture everyone's attention. This new topic quickly led them to discussing the strange reality of continuous sleeplessness. The speaker described how profound and overwhelming it is when one cannot simply find rest, painting a picture of debilitating fatigue that makes true wakefulness feel like an impossible luxury. The description became increasingly visceral. Every perception felt hazy, as if the world itself was shifting between dreams and reality. It wasn't merely tiredness, it was a thick fog descending over the mind, making even simple thoughts feel like they drifted through a permanent haze. As the world continued its slow, inescapable descent into confusion, the physical reality seemed to press down, clouding every thought and perception until everything was enveloped in a suffocating haze. A voice, silky and utterly dangerous, finally pierced through the growing murk. It delivered a sinister promise, an offer to help them drift away into a dream from which they would never awaken. With that haunting declaration, the encounter concluded with a final, gentle farewell. They simply wished him good night, Captain. Despite the gentle parting words, the echoes of a darker time continued to haunt them. A warning was given about difficult and disturbing content ahead. The scene shifts into profound memories, taking him back to his childhood when a devastating famine struck their village. The memory unfolded, painting a picture of absolute despair. With food critically scarce, the survivors found themselves cornered into unthinkable choices, forcing them to consume anything they could possibly put their hands on just to keep living. The weight of that history settles over them, an invisible burden passed down through years. The surrounding images feel distant, as if the present moment cannot quite shake off the haunting reality of their past desperation. A heavy silence falls, leaving the devastating weight of survival etched into their every shared look. The devastating weight of survival continued to press down upon them, forcing their existence into a horrifying cycle. Their diet had devolved from tree roots all the way down to living rats and cockroaches, marking a brutal descent. Days blurred into weeks, and the profound scarcity seemed to become a permanent stain on their lives, testing the limits of human endurance. Then, one day, the grueling struggle began to shift. They stumbled upon something miraculous, a table laden with sustenance. For those who had known only deprivation, this sight was nothing short of salvation. For the first time they could recall, and perhaps for a lifetime, their entire family had access to meat. The realization washed over them, a sudden, overwhelming rush of sustenance that felt like a forgotten dream finally realized. The weight of the previous struggle finally lifted, replaced by the soft, beautiful warmth of a single meal and the fragile hope it represented for their uncertain future. The warmth and fragile hope generated by the simple meal were abruptly challenged by a cold, damning realization. An insidious thought pierced the character's mind. They had genuinely enjoyed whatever unfolding situation was at hand. The air seemed to thicken after that startling realization, forcing the characters into a sudden, charged silence. The scope of their predicament and the true nature of the opposition's satisfaction settled around them like a heavy shroud. There was no immediate escape or reprieve, only the stark, lingering echo of their observation. The knowledge that they were being observed, and perhaps enjoyed from a distance, left them poised on an invisible precipice, waiting for the inevitable fallout. The psychological weight of those observing eyes lingered, transforming into a consuming internal dread. Since that day, the protagonist has been plagued by relentless worry. The thought kept him from finding truly restful sleep for even one single night. The source of this deep anxiety was a palpable fear, the worry that the next time something happened, he might be left completely alone and forgotten. Suddenly, a voice cut through the rising tide of panic. It was a dismissive warning, telling him that they had already heard this particular story before he sounded foolish in repeating it. The silence was shattered by a booming, self-mocking laugh. With an overwhelming air of casual brilliance and absolute certainty, the figure declared their own strength, raising the stakes higher than ever before. But the overwhelming force of his boasted strength seemed to dissipate instantly, replaced by a surprisingly casual realization. The figure simply laughed, dismissing the tremendous power with a light-hearted dismissal, attributing his newfound confidence to merely having achieved adequate sleep. He continued this strange explanation, suggesting that all of his dramatic improvement was merely thanks to a small piece of candy acquired from a vendor known as de Lenoir. However, the narrative tone abruptly shifted, taking on a serious gravity. The figure then mused that it was actually a demon who had gifted him this strength, resulting in an abnormal and staggering boost to both his brute power and agility. He paused dramatically, letting that weight of profound realization settle before the next action. The moment of reflection was shattered by a forceful, definitive declaration. With an undeniable flourish, he challenged the person before him, calling out to them with the respectful yet challenging title of captain, signaling that his performance in this conflict was about to resume. Even after the forceful declaration, a critical assessment immediately began to take place. Observers noted that this person, despite their current actions, had never actually received formal training in combat. Yet this perceived lack of schooling was overshadowed by something undeniable, a raw, innate talent for the sword. His movements displayed a natural gift that defied his years of inadequate lessons. But, despite the obvious talent, a profound flaw lingered. A moment of heavy hesitation fell over the entire scene, suggesting that even nature's greatest gifts could be ultimately undone. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken weight. All attention narrowed down to this singular moment of doubt, leaving the combatants suspended in a charged, unpredictable limbo. The charged, unpredictable limbo lingered, stretching out the moment until it felt almost unbearable. Every breath was held captive by the gravity of what had just been said. The silence was abruptly shattered by a chilling assessment. The speaker declared that the combatants' greatest weakness stemmed directly from their profound lack of experience. Followed by an unnerving sound, that echoed the finality of a pronouncement. A moment later, the tone shifted dramatically. The character made a casual observation about their opponent's durability, noting with an almost affectionate flair just how sturdy and pretty they were. All the weight of the conflicting remarks the dismissive critique, followed by the seemingly complimenting assessment settled over them. The confrontation now hung in the air, every detail observed and analyzed, suggesting that whatever came next would be far more perilous than either side anticipated. The suffocating tension of the confrontation seemed to momentarily dissipate, allowing a sudden acknowledgement to pass between them. One character spoke softly, offering an understanding directed specifically toward Quarter. The weight of the moment shifted, transforming into a deep, shared vulnerability. It became clear that struggling with peace was not confined to just one person. They confessed that troubled sleep haunted both of their nights, leading naturally to a tender plea for forgiveness. The space following that confession felt charged, heavy with unspoken truths and the fragile weight of mutual understanding. All they could do was wait for a response to their sorrow. Their plea crystallized into an earnest, almost fragile hope that the other person could extend that same mercy and grant them forgiveness in return. The moment stretched, a beat of profound silence allowing the emotional impact of their vulnerability to settle deep into the quiet air. But just as a resolution seemed imminent, the quiet was shattered. A desperate voice cut through the air, calling out Quarter's name with palpable urgency. The echoes of the urgent cry slowly dissipate, leaving behind a sudden, deafening silence in the tense atmosphere. The initial shock and panic begin to recede from the immediate surroundings. Time seems to slow down, hanging suspended in the weight of what was just said. The dust settles not just in the air, but around the hearts of those who remain. However, the mood shifts away from desperation. A weary voice finally murmurs out a sentiment of exhaustion, indicating that sleepiness has overcome them. The moment turns solemn, marked by a profound farewell directed specifically to Quarter. The speaker whispers a gentle good night, but the conversation doesn't end there. Instead, a promise is offered: one wonderful lullaby will be let out into the quiet night, leaving the recipient in anticipation of sweet, restful slumber. The atmosphere settled into a hush, the weight of the promised lullaby hanging sweetly in the air. It was a perfect moment of quiet surrender, broken only by the single, poignant utterance of the words "just one last time." A profound silence followed the final declaration, allowing the dramatic weight of those words to wash over everything. The moment stretched out, leaving the viewer caught in the perfect suspension between anticipation and reality, waiting for the song or perhaps something far more significant. The perfect suspension finally breaks. The intense, dramatic tension that held everything captive evaporates, replaced by the immediate weight of consequence and struggle, launching him back into the heart of conflict. A frustrated roar bursts from him. He realizes that his adversaries are far more persistent and irritating than he had anticipated, calling them relentlessly troublesome. The gravity of their situation weighs heavily upon him. He reflects on how unexpected the ordeal was, admitting that he never thought he would have to navigate through such a confined and grueling tunnel. Yet as the memory settles, a profound sense of accomplishment washes over him. He accepts that every minute of hardship, every struggle within the darkness, was ultimately worth the outcome. The profound sense of accomplishment finally crystallizes into manic victory. He lets out a triumphant cry, shouting his success in having finally secured the one beloved mana. The euphoria quickly gives way to a chilling, predatory resolve. He outlines his immediate next step, extracting and consuming the very heart of the human standing before him. With his intentions finalized, the figure delivers a simple, chilling statement, confirming that their target was exactly where he had anticipated. With their intentions finalized and the location confirmed, the tense air immediately thickened into a cage of accusation. The confrontation wasn't gentle. It began with pointed questions, forcing an explanation as to how the escape tunnel was discovered, or if crucial information had been passed along by someone known only as Quarter. However, the aggressive questioning quickly gave way to a manipulative shift. The figure seemed to drop their harsh guard, replacing it with a chillingly casual demeanor as they suggested that perhaps they should simply have a private word, adopting a deceptive air of familiarity directed at someone close. But the performance was short-lived. As the proximity increased, a calculating smirk spread across the figure's face. The veneer of casualness shattered as they suddenly realized something pivotal, leading them to utter a pointed declaration it was, indeed, the person standing before them. Having revealed their true identity, the figure's composure initially faltered. A deep wave of anxiety crossed them as they spoke, conveying a palpable fear that perhaps they had been discovered by an army of knights. However, that worry vanished as quickly as it arrived. They looked around, letting out a breath of profound relief, realizing with sudden certainty that they had nothing to fear from the surrounding environment. But even this moment of safety proved fleeting. The atmosphere shattered with a sudden, sharp command that cut through the air, delivering an unmistakable order to tear him apart. The weight of the command hung heavy in the air, paralyzing movement and thought. The subsequent silence was not peaceful, it was a volatile vacuum, filling the space with palpable dread as every living being felt the force of that dark decree pressing down on their very souls. The tension built unbearably. It was a slow, agonizing compression of the atmosphere, every shadow seeming to deepen and twist into menacing shapes, hinting at the overwhelming power about to be unleashed. In the resulting silence, all eyes fixed upon an unseen focal point, the source of the impending destruction. The anticipation reached a fever pitch, demanding nothing less than a catastrophic release. Suddenly, a voice echoed, not loud, but resonating through the very bones. It declared that indolence would consume itself from within, sounding less like a threat and more like an undeniable law of nature. A breath was caught, the air momentarily suspended in shocked silence. It was a beat of stunned realization following the pronouncement, allowing the gravity of the curse to truly settle upon all present. The moment of stillness shattered, replaced by a creeping sense of dread that spread outward from the epicenter. The implication of the words, the inescapable decay, began to manifest physically around them. A sharp cry pierced the air, a raw and involuntary sound of agony. It was the physical embodiment of the curse taking hold, an audible rejection against the overwhelming tide of decaying power. As the agonizing sensation of the curse pulsed through his body, a desperate question escaped him. Under the immense weight of the unfamiliar power and decay, he was forced to confront the terrifying possibility: was this affliction truly a curse? The internal struggle quickly manifested into agonizing physical reality. He felt his body growing heavy, every simple movement accompanied by a searing ache. Despite the overwhelming weakness and fatigue, a sharp tactical thought cut through the pain. Dragging this debilitating condition out would put him at an unacceptable disadvantage in their current fight. Even while battling the excruciating pain, his attention was forcibly pulled away from himself and directed toward their opponent. He finally acknowledged that the person in front of him was not merely a mindless brute, but someone who possessed genuine intelligence. However, that recognition was immediately tempered by a deep-seated skepticism. His focus, previously battling internal pain, was now fully gripped by the intelligence of his opponent. The challenger spoke out a profound question, baiting him with the weight of Lord Querental's legion of shadows, daring him to prove he could handle such immense power. The gravity of the challenge did little to deter him. With a casual, almost mocking tone, he dismissed the sheer scope of the threat, suggesting that whatever force was being mentioned sounded more like an animal farm than a true legion and far too small to be taken seriously. Such open defiance ignited a dangerous rage in his rival. He let out an incredulous laugh, his demeanor rapidly shifting into one of furious contempt at the dismissal. The tension snapped, and the confrontation immediately spiraled into chaos. With a sharp cry of command, another figure shouted an order to attack, signaling that no further dialogue would pass between them. The battle was about to break loose. The explosive confrontation, which had been building toward an inevitable clash, suddenly stalled. A voice cut through the tension, referencing law and procedure, stating that their duty was only to take the other person in alive. However, the speaker's tone faltered, trailing off with a hesitant breath, suggesting a deep internal struggle. The fleeting moment of doubt was immediately replaced by a blistering accusation. The figure facing the opponent pressed their grievances, exposing the raw pain and rage over how their subordinate had been tricked and sold to a demon. The accusation hung heavy in the air, forcing a sudden and charged silence. The weight of such betrayal seemed to momentarily paralyze them both. The speaker then seemed to abandon all pretense of restraint. With a sudden, vicious shift in demeanor, they dismissed any adherence to law or honor, announcing with brutal clarity that their intention was now immediate death for the opponent. The words hanging in the air of immediate death and absolute intent did not just fill the space, they seemed to solidify it, draining all warmth and resistance from the atmosphere. Every breath felt sharp, heavy with impending catastrophe. The moment stretched, taut and brittle, forcing every character within the scene to confront not just their enemy, but the terrifying reality of their own cornered existence. The tension reached a critical peak, a screaming silence where every muscle was strained and every nerve ending vibrated under the immense weight of judgment. All eyes remained locked in battle, but suddenly the rigid silence was brutally shattered. A raw, choked cry tore through the air, a guttural arg, signaling not a victory blow, but a sudden and undeniable moment of agonizing failure or profound pain. The painful cry served only as a prelude to the ultimate condemnation. It was delivered with cold, absolute power. The individual crushed by the weight of judgment shall undeniably be the true sinner. The weight of that final condemnation, declaring the individual crushed by judgment to be the true sinner, ignited a flare of pure rage. A furious shout erupted from deep within, screaming an accusation of oppression. The shockwave of the outcry seemed to hang heavy in the air, momentarily silencing all resistance. The tension tightened around them like an invisible chokehold. The atmosphere grew thick with anticipation, every character holding their breath as if awaiting a fatal strike. Before the combatants could react to the previous outburst, a sinister smirk spread across an opponent's face. They seemed thoroughly entertained by the escalating drama. A menacing question followed, dripping with disdain. Then came the chilling declaration this was a triple curse, one so potent that even seasoned knights would find it almost impossible to escape. The full implication of the curse settled over the battlefield. A terrible power had been unleashed, leaving all involved facing an unknown and devastating peril. The full implication of the curse settled over the battlefield, leaving all involved facing an unknown and devastating peril. Before anyone could process the sheer magnitude of what had been unleashed, a chilling voice cut through the sudden quiet, delivering a malicious and taunting threat to those present. The words hung in the air, an acidic residue of menace. A sudden, heavy silence fell upon the devastated landscape, amplifying the tension and making every remaining breath feel weighted with danger. Yet even amidst the shock and impending doom, confusion began to surface. Someone questioned what had just been discussed, expressing profound uncertainty regarding the relevance or existence of knights. The conversation only deepened the mystery. Another character shifted their focus to what was said, stating that they could not hear properly and asking for the details to be repeated. Having struggled to fully grasp the details of what had been discussed, one character's patience snaps. A deep sigh of exasperation escapes them as they dismiss the current interaction with a pointed wave, their annoyance boiling over into audible contempt. The mounting tension culminates in a raw outburst. The sheer frustration becomes overwhelming, forcing the character to deliver a sharp declaration that they have absolutely endured enough of whatever situation unfolded. The air thickens immediately following that explosive declaration. The immediate aftermath holds a suffocating weight, forcing everyone present to absorb the magnitude of what had just been said. A charged silence descends upon the group. The energy from the previous confrontation hasn't diminished, but it has solidified into a heavy, palpable anticipation. Every eye in the room seems to lock onto a single point, waiting for the slightest shift in expression or movement that might break the unbearable quiet. Suddenly, the narrative shifts away from emotional conflict and towards a powerful reveal. A specific card is identified with sudden clarity. It was the magical beast named Cardinal's Finger. This revelation acts as both a pause and a significant new pivot in their desperate quest. The profound shock of the magical card, Cardinal's Finger, settled heavily over the characters. The immediate focus on this powerful reveal caused a momentary suspension of action. Time seemed to stretch and thin, leaving only the residual weight of unbelievable magic in the air. The silent moment of awe was violently broken. The atmosphere grew taut, the lingering echoes of the revelation hardening into a distinct confrontation. All attention shifted suddenly, not to the cards or magic, but to a single, immediate point of conflict. A voice, dripping with contempt and immense disdain, sliced through the mounting tension. The speaker addressed a nearby guard captain, dismissing his presence and capability as nothing more than pitiful. The stinging words of dismissal hung heavy in the air, leaving a silence so profound that it seemed to swallow all remaining sounds. The intense tension, built by arrogance and expectation, finally reached an unstable peak. Every eye in the vicinity was now fixed on the speaker, waiting for the inevitable confrontation to ignite. The pressure felt immense, forcing a dramatic pause before the story could move forward. This held moment served only to heighten the dramatic stakes. The characters braced themselves, ready for the next devastating move in this high-stakes encounter. Suddenly, a choked burst of frustration tore through the silence. The character stared in disbelief at something before them, realizing it was unmarked by a single scratch, leading to an explosive question: how could anyone fail to defeat him using nothing more than pure physical strength? The air crackled with the sheer weight of impossible logic. Staring into the evidence that defied all understanding, the character could only utter a sharp, dramatic realization in that case. The moment hung heavy, every word of the accusation reverberating in the suddenly silent hall. The weight of the unexplained truth began to settle over them. A charged stillness followed the pronouncement, leaving only the echo of baffled doubt in its wake. But the grand declaration was met not with panic, but with sheer bafflement. A single question, spoken barely above a whisper, broke the intense tension. The moment of utter confusion and questioning was immediately swallowed by screams of outrage. Several voices erupted, condemning the carelessness of a fool who had marched himself straight into the path of danger. The accusations were only compounded by a cold, disbelieving tone, expressing deep skepticism about what could possibly bring happiness to the character in question. Despite the dramatic outburst of frustration, a clear voice cut through the chaos. The assessment was matter-of-fact. The objective of infiltration had been successfully achieved. The narrative tone shifted instantly, replaced by a chilling sense of authority. A leader stepped forward, defining the next required move. They needed to summon an entity, a filthy demon, out into the open. With that declarative statement hanging in the air, a profound silence descended upon the group. Every eye fixed on nothing but the center of the room, waiting for the unimaginable power to manifest. The intense waiting, the atmosphere vibrating with unreleased energy, finally broke. A voice pierced the profound silence, delivering a cold and cutting realization. They had known that power was stirring all along. The speaker continued, commenting on the target's remarkably quiet state since they had demonstrated that power before. A teasing mockery followed, implying that such a sudden victory should have resulted in far more embarrassment than the current situation allowed. The tone sharpened into a direct demand, requiring the opponent to effortlessly manifest their strength and hand over whatever power they possessed. This blatant expectation was immediately followed by an audible sign of sheer contempt for such audacity. The scrutiny softened momentarily, shifting into a patronizing disapproval. The address was laced with disdain, calling the opponent both rude and foolish in their inherent humanity. But the condescension dissolved into a completely different state. The overwhelming declaration was not of victory or defeat, but of sheer, unsettling curiosity. This whole confrontation, no matter how dramatic, had piqued their interest. As the previous confrontation dissolved into a state of unsettling curiosity, one key player finally relented. They dramatically offered to lend their formidable powers, but with the swift weight of an inescapable caveat. This aid would only come on one single condition. The shocking declaration drew an immediate, visceral reaction. A gasp of disgust escaped a character who questioned their own low expectations, realizing the depth of the power they were facing. This opponent was clearly demonic. They urgently sought clarity regarding what new reality and rules governed this sudden entanglement. Cutting through the rising tension, yet another figure stepped forward to make a sharp and definitive demand. They warned that their identity must change. They were never to be referred to by the insult of being a quickshot again. Still reeling from the gravity of these demands, one character admitted to feeling an unexplained offense regarding the entire exchange. Though visibly annoyed by the implication, they eventually chose resignation over conflict, brushing off the intense situation as nothing more than petty nonsense. The intense conversation eventually cooled, leaving the character feeling a weary sense of resignation. But even as they tried to dismiss the exchange as nothing more than petty nonsense, an unexpected physical sensation interrupted them, like a sudden surge or jolt deep within their core. The feeling was overwhelming, like a powerful current rushing through their entire body. A realization dawned upon them as they grasped what this intense energy source truly was. It was aura. They found the sensation highly invigorating, admitting that this new power felt wonderfully good. The heightened awareness kept building, pulling the character deeper into the mysteries of this newfound energy. The flow of power remained potent, preparing them for what was inevitably coming next. The powerful flow of latent energy, which had been building steadily in the atmosphere, finally reached a critical tipping point, signaling that whatever awaited was about to manifest. The abrupt change caused immediate chaos, prompting shouts of confusion and alarm as the characters struggled to understand the sudden upheaval taking place around them. Amidst the rising confusion, a sharp gasp broke the tension as someone recognized an unseen power. The distinct presence of an aura had suddenly been revealed to their astonished sight. The revelation was utterly breathtaking, leaving the witnesses in a state of stunned disbelief. The shocking truth slowly dawned upon them: this enigmatic individual wasn't just powerful, they were revealed to be a knight. The air thick with the weight of that shocking revelation, the fact that this mysterious figure was a knight did not allow for a moment's breath. The tension coiled tight, poised to snap. The disbelief quickly curdled into fury. An enraged shout ripped through the tense silence, challenging the identity and presence of the unknown individual who stood before them. The confrontation deepened into suspicion. The accuser questioned if the knight had been dispatched directly by the imperial palace, followed by a trembling realization regarding their own hidden schemes. How was it possible that their clandestine plans were already known? A desperate whisper cut through the panic, lamenting the certainty that no leak should have occurred. The entire situation suddenly felt compromised, exposed to outside interference. As the political pressure and external threats mounted, the focus suddenly shifted away from the opponents. A deeper conflict rose within one of the players, leading them to ask a profound, self-questioning query: who exactly was standing in this moment? The weight of that identity question hung in the air, unanswered, leaving all witnesses to process a truth far more complex than either power or politics could explain. The weight of that profound identity question still lingered in the air, leaving everyone to process a truth far too complex for simple analysis. Just as the gravity of the moment seemed poised to crush them all, a familiar, almost casual voice cut through the tension, addressing him only by title: your friendly neighborhood guard captain. The tension that had gripped the area seemed to dissipate in an instant. A collective sigh of relief followed, marking a transition into profound quietude. For now, everything was finally still. The peaceful silence settled over the area, creating a momentary pocket of calm following the storm of revelations and combat. Time seemed to slow down, allowing every character a chance to breathe in the sudden absence of threat. The figure observed the scene one last time, delivering a gentle yet definitive farewell to the quarter. With that seemingly simple instruction to sleep well, the narrative reached its natural close, leaving the characters alone in the aftermath of the night's mystery. Despite the tranquil farewell and the promise of a peaceful night, the weight of lingering mystery refused to lift. The quiet settling over the location felt less like rest and more like an agonizing suspension, where every breath seemed charged with unspoken tension. As the characters finally succumbed to what appeared to be natural exhaustion, a subtle but distinct shift in the atmosphere signaled that their reprieve was temporary. The deep silence began to resonate with an underlying current of impending doom. The characters were left grappling with the aftermath of their encounter, processing the fragments of truth and deceit woven throughout the night. They sought some semblance of closure in the stillness. The tension, which had been steadily building in the quiet hours, finally reached a breaking point. A flash of realization crossed someone's mind. The crucial pieces were beginning to fit together. It was then that the truth spilled out, spoken in shocked disbelief. The understanding dawned on everyone present: this powerful technique was not a momentary burst of magic, but a spell specifically designed to activate only after death itself. Just as the weight of that final truth, that the powerful technique was intrinsically tied to death itself, settled over them, an immediate outburst of supreme annoyance cut through the air. The frustration wasn't directed at a grand enemy or fate, but rather at a specific individual who seemed determined to provoke intense exasperation even in this aftermath. The conversation, however, quickly shifted away from life and death. A new voice rose up, laced with disbelief, questioning the sheer frequency of characters displaying an almost obsessive devotion to demonic beings. It was a truly unbelievable spectacle. The lingering silence that followed these critical remarks allowed the overwhelming drama and emotional exhaustion of the preceding events to settle, leaving everyone grappling with the sudden realization that their current struggles were not only monumental, but perhaps even ridiculously melodramatic. The weight of the drama and emotional exhaustion that had settled over them was abruptly shattered by a sudden, raw exclamation of sheer disbelief. A stunned silence followed this initial outcry, allowing the shock of what had transpired to sink into every corner of the room. The mounting panic soon solidified into a desperate, muttered realization that they were truly in insurmountable trouble this time. The stark, desperate truth hung heavy in the air, solidifying the raw panic into a cold knot of dread. Every nerve ending screamed with the knowledge that their situation had gone far beyond simple danger. They were trapped by forces utterly insurmountable. A wave of overwhelming realization washed over the group. It was a visceral understanding that even their combined strength or cunning would be meaningless against the massive, unseen threat they faced. They were cornered. The pressure was crushing, building into a tangible atmosphere of defeat. It became apparent that escape wasn't just difficult, it might be fundamentally impossible without some monumental miracle to intervene. As the final vestiges of hope began to dwindle, they found themselves facing an irreversible precipice. The sheer scale of the danger looming ahead demanded a confrontation with impossible odds, setting the stage for something far more devastating than anyone had anticipated. The gravity of the preceding moments, the impossible odds and devastating confrontations suddenly dissipate, leaving behind a jarring silence. The tension doesn't just fade, it seems to deflate entirely, replaced by an unexpected, almost comedic inertia. The overwhelming sense of impending doom gives way to sheer exhaustion. A deep, frustrated sigh escapes the character as if the weight of reality itself has become too much to bear. The realization washes over them that they simply need a break. The focus shifts to another complaint, grounded in something far more immediate and less mystical: the fact that they are not being paid overtime for their immense efforts. The sheer financial burden of their labor seems to outweigh any supernatural peril. Suddenly, a sharp exclamation cuts through the stream of mundane complaints. The voice calls out to a superior presence, addressing someone with a clear sense of status and formality. The sequence ends on a pause, a fleeting moment of stillness that allows the weight of these disparate complaints, ranging from physical exhaustion to lost wages, to settle over the characters before whatever grand event awaits them truly begins. But the moment of stillness was violently shattered. As the weight of their complaints began to settle, a desperate cry cut through the air. It was a frantic call for Lady Vivian's whereabouts, a single name shouted out in sheer alarm. The shout intensified into a panicked demand, the urgency palpable in the air as they realized that someone vital was missing and nowhere to be found. As the immediate panic momentarily subsided, a creeping dread replaced it. A heavy silence settled over the scene, punctuated only by their anxious breaths. The characters found themselves stranded in an atmosphere thick with anticipation, every shadow seeming to conceal a looming threat. Time seemed to stretch and distort. The tension built methodically, heightening the stakes as their desperate search continued into an unknown space. Without warning, the building silence was broken by a horrifying recognition. Danger was not only near, it was advancing. A terrible truth became instantly clear. They were cornered, face to face with the menacing presence of the Inquisitor and a formidable knight, marking the beginning of their inescapable confrontation. The overwhelming pressure of the confrontation with the Inquisitor and the powerful knight was too much. A shaky gasp escaped them, suggesting that the sudden reality of their situation had momentarily stunned everyone present. In the face of this threat, a desperate question ripped from their throat: who exactly were these people? A tense silence followed, leaving the dramatic stakes hanging in the air. Then a sudden shift occurred. One of the figures seemed to realize that perhaps what they had done, or perhaps the confrontation itself, might have been too taxing for someone. Observing a figure who had fallen unconscious, an instinct took over. They moved to cover the person with a handkerchief that had been stolen from someone named Kell, ensuring they received some immediate care. The urgency of the moment eventually settled, marking a distinct passage of time. The immediate aftermath gave way to an unsettling awareness: things were now changed. A quiet inevitability settled over the scene. The fate of the captain was clearly marked for this particular day. His story had reached its natural conclusion. The focus shifts, the vibrant action receding into a moment of heavy contemplation. The curtain of the day's events begins to fall. A brief, charged pause hangs in the air, leaving the audience to grapple with the implications of what has transpired. What awaits them as this chapter draws its final, breathless close? As the atmosphere settles from that dramatic moment, a sudden gasp breaks the silence. A voice calls out urgently, addressing someone by their title, "My lady." The concern deepens, marked by another question full of worry about her whereabouts. Where could they possibly be? The search continues, an atmosphere thick with escalating tension as the mystery deepens. Finally, a direction is given, a simple utterance pointing out a location over there. The collective focus shifts entirely to the source of that hint, guiding their attention across the distance. The relief washes over them in a sudden, powerful shout, calling out the name with immediate recognition, Lady Vivian. The echo of her name still ringing in the sudden silence, their relief quickly gave way to a fresh wave of anxiety. A desperate call ripped through the air, checking on the immediate safety and well-being of everyone present. But that concern immediately spiraled into something far more desperate. The shocking question ripped through the gathering crowd: was she actually all right? Had they truly lost her, too? The gravity of the situation, the impossible loss hanging in the air, finally shattered the fragile composure. A raw outburst erupted from one of them, a furious declaration that spoke volumes about the deep anger brewing beneath their surface. The explosive moment of outburst was quickly followed by a wave of collective disbelief. Questions arose, fueled by shock, regarding how they could possibly have been unaware that the enemy held such dangerous power, the title of Dark Mage. The conversation soon took a cynical turn, shifting their exasperation to mocking suggestions about official gate inspections in the aftermath of such chaos. The immediate dust settled, and the narrative moved forward in time. A full week had elapsed since the terrifying assault by the Dark Mage, allowing a brief moment of relative peace to settle over the land. Despite the sheer violence of the conflict, a miraculous report surfaced. Lord Fulputz had survived the incredible ordeal. He was found miraculously uninjured, even after traveling through the air in such a chaotic manner. Furthermore, his daughter Vivian also emerged unharmed. With the key figures accounted for and physically recovered, the disastrous incident was finally brought to a definitive close. The sheer scope of the attack had passed, marking a temporary, fragile period of calm. The temporary period of calm was brutally shattered. Suddenly, an undeniable declaration spread through the air due to false testimony and fabricated evidence. Quarter was formally recorded as having fallen in battle against a demon. Compounding this grave accusation, it was announced that Quarter's family would be granted official compensation due to the tragic findings. The ensuing condemnation intensified, voices dismissing him as a fool who had rashly charged headfirst into the devastating fray with a monster. A cynical sentiment then swept through the crowd, suggesting that in some dark way, Quarter had finally achieved his deepest desire, concluding with a mocking farewell for him to sleep well. But amidst the wave of condemnation, someone refused to let his story end there. A powerful declaration rose up, insisting that regardless of the official ruling, they intended to forever honor the undeniable courage Quarter had shown by facing the demon head-on. The voice that championed him continued, refusing to let the severity of the moment overshadow the truth. Amidst the weight of official decree and condemnation, a solemn promise was made. Every word now resonated with an unmistakable gravity, focusing entirely on a single man, Quarter. The declaration wasn't just praise, it was an absolute commitment, aimed straight at Quarter. More profound than acknowledging the fight, the speakers emphasized that his true value lay in the unwavering adherence to his code. Quarter himself had preserved his honor and dignity, even as a humble guard. The weight of those words settled over the crowd, a powerful affirmation echoing in the sudden hush, the silent testament to a man's unbreakable spirit. The dramatic silence surrounding the man's affirmation gradually gave way to more casual conversation. A voice then questioned a captain about a rumored change, noting that they were expecting a new rookie to replace the quartermaster. The discussion continued, suggesting that the newcomer should be introducing himself sometime that very day. Before anyone could respond, a sudden burst of energy cut through the talk as someone shouted out to their superior. It was at this moment that the rookie stepped forward, delivering a formal announcement of his presence and reporting for duty with Team 4 of the Outer Guards. He maintained a confident demeanor as he greeted everyone present, attempting to make a strong first impression. The introduction was complete, the rookie having officially taken his place among the team. The moment of passing the torch, or perhaps just filling a vacant spot, settled over the squad as they all watched him. The moment the new member settled into his role, the tension surrounding the squad broke, giving way to a wave of overwhelming emotion. Suddenly, voices calling out names rang through the space, demanding a presence they thought was lost forever. One character exclaimed urgently about needing the return of someone named Quarter, followed by another expressing pure disbelief at seeing their boss again after so much time. After the highly charged exchange, a more casual assessment broke the tension. A character offered a dismissive but slightly approving remark, suggesting that despite the chaos, this new individual actually appeared to be somewhat reliable. This gentle observation led to a deeper, more personal moment. One character paused, sharing a reflection that the new member somehow evoked memories of someone important from their own past. The thoughtful atmosphere quickly dissolved into a barrage of exaggerated storytelling. Another member, unable to keep quiet, launched into an overly dramatic tale about facing thousands of zombies, exaggerating their own heroism and even reminding the group that without their efforts, even Boss Aaron would not have survived. The sheer noisiness of the retelling was almost palpable. The overly dramatic storyteller's antics were swiftly met with a sharp retort. Someone questioned how they ended up saddled with such an incompetent kid, only for a friend to immediately catch them, reminding the boastful individual that proclaiming those words so loudly was far from acceptable. After the heated banter and friendly chastisements about dramatic overstatements, one individual attempted to diffuse the tension by presenting another person with a fresh round of drinks. The recipient merely paused, making a small sound of realization as if the unexpected gesture had caught them off guard. Suddenly, however, the quiet moment was broken by a sharp warning. Someone urgently called out for everyone to wait and pay attention. The exclamation was directed toward Miss Hannah, suggesting her name needed immediate recall or attention. Reacting to the commotion, a character voiced confusion before attempting an explanation, stumbling through words that were vague and unclear. Still fighting to make sense of the situation, the character paused only long enough to start a more detailed explanation, beginning with the phrase that they saw. Still fighting to make sense of the situation, the character paused only long enough to start a more detailed explanation, beginning with the phrase that they saw. Before those words could fully settle, however, an earnest apology was offered, admitting fault for past actions. The speaker then continued, observing that it seemed almost like a routine for someone operating as a mercenary to maintain such an abrasive and rough demeanor. A momentary silence fell over the scene, allowing the full weight of the exchanged criticisms and apologies to settle heavily in the tense atmosphere. Just as the tension threatened to consume them, a gentle voice spoke up, addressing Dylan directly and assuring him that everything was, in fact, all right. The quiet reassurance was quickly followed by another voice, one that carried the deep resonance of practiced authority. This final speaker asserted their experience, warning that they had encountered many individuals like Dylan during the lengthy time they spent managing and running the inn. Continuing the conversation about people who shared a certain type of energy, the speaker delivered a cold, sharp warning. The severity was clear. If the person acted out again, there would be dire consequences. Faced with this absolute threat, the recipient could do nothing but crumble into panicked apologies. After the intensity of that confrontation, another character offered a more relaxed observation. They remarked on someone named Hannah, noting with slight wonder just how unique and remarkable she truly was. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as a voice called out to someone known by the nickname Weasel. The direct address immediately pulled all focus onto that individual. The person speaking immediately followed up the call by gesturing towards something, presenting it directly to the recipient. The tone reached a dramatic peak with a formal declaration. With undeniable authority, the speaker announced that from this day forward, the newly recognized individual was officially welcomed as a full member of Team 4. The celebratory atmosphere of the welcome was instantly undercut by a sudden, palpable tension. The speaker's tone hardened completely, delivering twin demands. They expected their absolute best performance, and failing to meet those expectations meant an immediate exit from the ranks. A heavy silence descended over the group. The words, though delivered with detached authority, hung in the air, demanding a level of focus and resolve that felt immense. Within the quiet space, a profound commitment formed. The weight of the challenge was accepted. This was not merely an opportunity, but a crucible that demanded absolute devotion. Finally, the response was immediate and unwavering. A loud declaration echoed through the hall, pledging complete loyalty and promising to pour every ounce of their strength into the team's mission. Despite the sharp demands that had punctuated the moment, they were nonetheless welcomed back into Team 4 of the Outer Guards with overwhelming warmth. Later, Dylan would look back and remember this specific confluence: the tension, the vow, and the solid promise of belonging. Carrying the weight of that solid promise and deep sense of belonging, the group's initial tension finally dissipated. The moment settled into a semblance of normalcy when a cheerful voice greeted someone new, acknowledging them as a rookie. Receiving the welcome, the newcomer offered a reciprocal greeting, signaling a fresh beginning within the team. However, this period of comfort proved fragile. The sudden weight of memory and regret surfaced, manifesting as a deep, sorrowful lament that seemed to hang heavily in the newly formed camaraderie. The murmuring words carried a profound sense of failure, the speaker realizing that they should have taken action and escaped at their earliest opportunity. The weight of the realization, the profound regret over inaction and failure, finally settled, drawing the protagonist into a deep and troubled haze. A sudden, sharp sound, a gasp of surprise, ripped the protagonist from their dazed state. The figure nearby immediately voiced alarm, warning that sleeping outdoors could lead to catching a cold. The words continued with gentle concern, asking if the protagonist had been sleeping properly and urging them to take proper care of themselves. When the protagonist responded with a confused murmur, the speaker softened their tone, expressing gratitude that they managed to wake up and suggesting that no thanks were necessary. As the gentle moment of recovery concluded, a shift in the surrounding atmosphere signaled that their quiet respite was over. A wave of abrasive energy washed over them, pulling the protagonist back into the immediate chaos. One of the aggressors immediately boasted about their methods, insisting that such actions were expert procedure. Their tone grew aggressive when they attempted to justify their roughness by citing the recent threat of demonic attacks, arguing that extreme caution required them to be unduly hard on every passerby. This bravado, however, was quickly challenged by a desperate plea, questioning if this violent approach truly represented the right way to handle the situation. The critique intensified as someone nearby openly pointed out the sheer audacity of their behavior. The actions of extorting coins from coachmen and using physical force under the guise of demonic inspection were highlighted as fundamentally corrupt. This third observation raised a critical question, forcing everyone to consider whether such predatory habits truly reflected the duties and morals of genuine city guards. Ignoring the pleas of fairness, a male voice laughed scornfully at the criticism. The pressure mounted immediately as they were ordered to pay up their dues with aggressive urgency, demanding that 2 simple silver coins would be enough to grant entry into the fortress. Despite the protests and visible resistance, the guards maintained their confrontational stance, relentlessly insisting on compliance. Given the visible resistance and mounting pressure, someone observed that this process of demanding tribute was remarkably effective. They commented on how naturally skilled the guards were at cornering people and extracting what they desired. This opportunistic success was acknowledged. Further, the continuous struggle meant an ever-increasing accumulation of wealth and silver were finding their way into their pockets. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted dramatically from one of profiteering to raw hostility. The focus narrowed as a piercing insult was thrown out, directed sharply at another person's capacity for thought. The harsh words hung in the air, leaving a profound silence to settle over the area. The force of the outburst seemed to momentarily paralyze everyone present. Just as the profound silence threatened to swallow everything whole, a loud outcry shattered the tension. An accusatory voice flared out, demanding answers about why they were being searched for after seeing the recognizable crest of House Fenner displayed on the carriage. The person being accused reacted instantly, dismissing the concern with extreme disdain and declaring that the accusation meant absolutely nothing to them. They even adopted a cynical tone, suggesting that if someone truly had an issue with them, perhaps settling it with some silver would be preferable. However, before the argument could escalate further, there was a sharp, sudden sound of impact, an audible cry that cut through all their posturing. The scene falls into a tense quiet, allowing the physical blow and the resulting immediate chaos to settle over all the characters. The moment of confrontation has only just begun to unfold. Amidst the lingering chaos from the immediate confrontation, a harsh, mocking laughter erupts. The tone is dripping with contempt as one character aggressively dismisses their opponent, claiming they are merely an inexperienced rookie who fails to grasp the severity of what has transpired. The laughter is abruptly cut short by a gasp of utter bewilderment. A character stares around in disbelief, realizing the unsettling truth despite the high stakes and apparent power display. The group confronting them consists solely of common soldiers and no visible nobility. However, before the situation can descend into further personal conflict, a firm voice cuts through the tension. The character announces that due to recent events, Lord Fulputz has issued a formal decree requiring all individuals passing through the castle gates to undergo a full search and inspection. They issue an unwavering warning any refusal to cooperate is considered a direct challenge to the authority of the Lord himself. Following the firm warning delivered regarding Lord Fulputz's unchallengeable decree, a thick tension settles over the scene. The solemnity of his words leaves everyone suspended in an uncomfortable silence, only realizing the gravity of the enforced restrictions. The tense quiet is quickly shattered by raw outrage. A man begins addressing the crowd, voicing disgust towards a commoner who had dared to insult and call him a fool. Before any counterargument can fully surface, another voice draws attention, pointing out with palpable excitement that the executioner was about to get exceedingly busy. However, the aggressive energy in the air suddenly shifts. The man who had been dictating terms completely alters his demeanor and attitude once he recognizes that the group present lacks any significant noble presence. His confident posture visibly falters. In a clumsy attempt to defuse the escalating confrontation, he nervously offers some silver coins while extending a series of apologies for anything said in passing. He tries repeatedly to diminish the seriousness of past mistakes and harsh words, suggesting that everyone is prone to slip-ups sometimes. His desperate attempts culminate in an even more casual dismissal of everything they had previously discussed. With the immediate conflict seemingly diffused, and everything having been laboriously settled into a temporary truce, an almost unsettling silence takes hold. It is a moment of fragile calm that signals a pause in their desperate interactions. The lingering silence that followed the conflict was heavy, an almost palpable weight settled over the clearing. Every breath taken seemed to echo too loudly, amplifying the tension in the fragile truce. Suddenly, a booming voice cuts through the quiet, issuing an authoritative declaration. The speaker reveals that their current task is actually related to special orders from a higher lord, specifically detecting demons. Then, with finality and official grace, they grant safe passage, allowing the individuals before them to move onward. However, the pronouncement seems to hit someone hard. A frustrated sigh escapes them. It was clearly a rejection, leaving them momentarily deflated and muttering an exclamation of failure. The moment of disappointment is immediately followed by a burst of raw, venomous fury. An unseen voice drips with bitter hatred, aimed at designating one man as nothing more than a curse and a wretched failure. The venomous words linger in the humid air, casting a spell of bitter condemnation over the man. The emotional residue of that absolute hatred leaves a tangible silence behind. The tension is almost unbearable. The environment seems to hold its breath, suggesting that whatever confrontation awaits will be sudden and unavoidable. The quiet moment is broken by a warning cry, alerting the captain that several members of the church are actively looking for him. The captain reacts with audible weariness and deep annoyance at the trouble accumulating around them. The immediate danger from the searching church members creates an atmosphere of palpable stress. Amidst this crisis, one character voices a deep sense of apprehension regarding returning to a specific place, noting that their reluctance was amplified by the presence and volatility of a little secret resident within their own body. The high stakes and internal struggles lead to a moment of nervous questioning. The character manages a strained, almost joking remark, expressing uncertainty about whether their current situation has already compromised them or if they are exposed. The weight of the moment settles heavily upon them. After these strained words, a profound silence falls over the group, leaving their desperate predicament hanging suspended in the air. The heavy weight of the moment, built on strained words and desperate silence, was abruptly shattered. A sudden rush of emotion replaced the tension as voices cried out names in ecstatic calls, a joyful welcome to Aaron, followed by an equally loud shout for Father Blyan. Amidst the renewed commotion, attention turned to someone who had simply been standing there. Whispers started circulating about her passive presence. Soon, Another conversation was drawn towards Aaron, filled with queries and surprise about what he might have experienced. The focus of the conversation intensified, revealing shocking news. It came to light that Aaron had not just been through some minor conflict, he had fought a demon, a feat that completely shifted their understanding of his true ordeal. Following the staggering revelation that he had faced a demon, the conversation continued to intensify. Inquisitor Joanna spoke slowly, her words confirming a profound truth. She had witnessed his actions and knew exactly what transpired. She then specified the depth of the danger, recalling that he had managed to protect Lady Vivian from a colossal monster threat. It was clear that his recent ordeal encompassed feats far beyond mere conflict. The praise then swelled into a deep admiration. Joanna revealed that she did not believe he had seen the use of the demon's powers, yet she acknowledged his incredible bravery. To stand up to such a mighty monster as only a guard captain was an act worthy of the highest commendation and sincere respect. Following the weight of deep admiration and sincere respect, the speaker continued to express profound gratitude for the unwavering faith shown. He then revealed that he had prepared a small gift as tokens of his appreciation. The recipient reacted with surprised exclamations, quickly dissolving into booming laughter that suggested immense pleasure at the sudden gift. Despite his light-hearted teasing, he managed to voice deep sincerity, stating that while his faith could never compare to Joanna's, a moment of genuine awe crossed his face as he gazed upon the item. He could not help but comment that it looked absolutely spectacular and perfect on the person wearing it. With sweeping, ceremonial gestures, the speaker declared that this garment granted him a prestigious new status as an honorary monk. He beamed with evident pride, asking if he found it lovely and emphasizing its amazing appearance. Despite the lavish display and proud performance, the recipient could only manage a response of sheer surprise at the gift's unexpected magnitude. With that overwhelming shock faded, their tone quickly dipped into resentment, prompting a bitter thought: why couldn't this generosity have simply taken the form of cold, hard cash like it had done before? They muttered something in a name solemn, as if naming the recipient solidified the underlying complaint. The conversation shifts sharply from money to favor. A more formal request enters the mix, and Inquisitor requires a tour of the sprawling castle grounds. The petitioner appeals, asking if someone would be kind enough to show her around. Their voice quickly adopts an urgent plea, stressing that they are now practically family and hoping this crucial favor could be granted. However, the appeal meets an immediate and blunt rejection. The speaker curtly dismisses them, declaring that they are too busy for such matters and waving a hasty farewell. This casual dismissal causes a visible flare of annoyance, leaving the character muttering a frustrated exclamation behind the retreating figure's back. What was their plan now? Left with nothing but residual anger. Left with nothing but the sting of dismissal. That residual frustration ignites into outright accusation. The character vents their fury, lamenting being summoned simply to perform annoying chores. This outburst quickly escalates into a vengeful vow, dedicating their focus to one person, the perceived guilty jerk whose downfall they are determined to engineer someday. The immediate rage fades, replaced by a shift in demeanor. The character references the title of Inquisitor before shaking their head dismissively, choosing to pivot away from dwelling on tiresome obligations and petty matters. A wave of chilling awareness washes over them. A dark internal reckoning takes hold, reminding the character of the profound danger surrounding their secret. If the truth of being marked by a demon were ever revealed, the consequences would be immediate and violent. The heavy atmosphere is broken by a mundane question about hunger. Seeing an opening for normalcy, the companion suggests they visit a specific restaurant, a place frequently visited, thereby redirecting the focus entirely away from their dark secrets and boiling rage. The heavy, fraught atmosphere slowly begins to crack under the weight of mundane reality. With nothing left but distraction as an escape hatch, the companion gently redirects their focus, suggesting they visit a familiar spot, a place that promises fleeting normalcy. But the emotional pressure cooker explodes nonetheless. A desperate outburst erupts, screaming that he would give every single possible reason for her to never see him again. Before anyone can process the raw pain of those words, the conversation abruptly pivots, grounding itself in something comforting and utterly predictable: the signature fish pie from Marsh's restaurant, a dish rumored to be made with the hands of Briggs' mother. The volatile scene falls silent. The echo of the harsh declaration lingers in the air, a stark contrast to the casual mention of supper. The weight of what was said hangs over them both, leaving only the distant promise of that specific pie as a fragile tether connecting their shattered present. The decision, seemingly made under duress and exhaustion, takes root. The allure of escaping the wreckage of their secrets leads them toward the familiar comfort of the restaurant, signaling a shift from explosive anger to quiet, reluctant retreat. But the forced calm of retreat shattered instantly. The weight of their secrets and the proximity to one another proved too much. With a raw burst of frustration, they lashed out, lamenting how impossible it was to maintain this facade. They expressed deep distress over being linked with an individual connected to the Inquisition, feeling that such association threatened their true nature, a profound struggle between the life they presented and the inner demon they contained. The sudden realization of their public image fueled a dramatic outburst. The passionate confession, meant to clear the air and draw boundaries, was met not with sympathy, but with cold dismissal. An icy question cut through the charged atmosphere, suggesting that whatever truth they were revealing, it was inadequate or lacking altogether. The challenger refused to let the subject drop, pressing forward with undeniable force. They repeated the accusation, framing it as an unavoidable reality, asking point-blank if there was truly nothing more to be found in their current predicament. The pressure mounted, cornering the character and leaving them unable to escape the searing scrutiny. Having been pressed to the absolute limit by relentless scrutiny, leaving them unable to escape the searing gaze of the accuser, their initial struggle seemed to falter. Yet, instead of outright defeat, a mask of contempt settled over them. They responded with a mockingly affirmative declaration, as if confirming an obvious truth, which quickly dissolved into a loud, sharp burst of laughter, a sound that managed to be both dismissive and terrifyingly confident. The harsh laughter faded into the oppressive silence. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, refusing to carry any sound until the weight of their words could truly settle upon everyone present. The lingering tension intensified, drawing out every beat of quietude. It was a precarious moment of pause, a pregnant silence that suggested both deep thought and simmering unrest. The confrontation remained poised on the brink of a dramatic shift. Everything felt suspended in this agonizing stillness, making the audience wonder what monumental blow or sudden revelation would finally break the suffocating peace. The monumental tension that had been building, suspended in an agonizing silence, finally hits a critical breaking point. Just as the audience braced themselves for the inevitable clash, for the dramatic revelation or crushing blow, the atmosphere suddenly shifts. The weight of impending action dissipates entirely, leaving behind only an unusual quietude. The ensuing conversation quickly descends into a domestic snark. One character expresses genuine surprise that the other managed to tolerate the rather unpleasant smell emanating from the meal, while another immediately follows up with a cutting jab about their supposed shabbiness as an inquisitor. A third party observes the pair, exclaiming with mock amazement that they seem so thoroughly engrossed in enjoying the fish pie. The host then continues their playful banter by offering them another serving of the delicious dish. The seemingly innocuous interaction causes a palpable reaction from someone nearby. They falter, stumbling over words in an awkward display of embarrassment, bringing a moment of sudden and profound silence to the unexpected social gathering. The profound silence following the awkward interaction was suddenly punctured by hushed murmurs. One person leaned in, voicing clear confusion about another individual's peculiar demeanor, questioning what might be troubling her. A softer voice dismissed the concern, suggesting perhaps that she was simply occupied with thoughts or commitments of her own. The conversational lull quickly dissolved, giving way to a different kind of energy. There was an exchange acknowledging the conclusion of a high-stakes round, followed immediately by an emphatic rebuttal, an insistent push for the activity or challenge to continue. As the enthusiasm peaked, one individual attempted to lighten the mood and maintain the good cheer. They suggested that their previous gesture had not been adequate enough for the enjoyment of everyone present, adding a final flourish by proclaiming that this round, or perhaps even this gathering, was now on them. Building on the mood of continued enthusiasm and generous offers, a sudden wave of despondency washed over the character. They murmured quietly, contemplating that perhaps having their heads smashed with a mace would have been a much more satisfactory outcome. The weighty moment hung heavily between them, leaving the group in an uncomfortable silence. Breaking the silence, a voice called out sharply, addressing an individual by the title of captain. This observation quickly turned into a compliment, noting that the captain's overall attire seemed to become more and more glamorous with every passing day. The topic then shifted entirely, as the character revealed that they had only recently discovered a massive perk. Wearing this item granted them discounts at numerous stores and restaurants. This led to a conversation about their honorary status, a monk, which drew incredulous reactions from others who openly questioned if hell itself had somehow frozen over. Having transitioned away from the farcical discussion of their strange, discount-granting status within hell itself, the conversation quickly shifted gears entirely. One individual suddenly prompted everyone's attention by revealing crucial gossip how Fenner had deployed soldiers, and these men were expected to be on duty alongside the group. The subject of these new arrivals immediately brought up Lord Fulputz's mandate, reminding them that they were supposed to maintain harmony with the Fenner contingent. The warning attached was clear: any trouble caused between groups would result in severe punishment. Among the group, a question arose regarding why this specific aspect, the potential for conflict, was being so heavily emphasized. A quick defense followed, asserting that none of them were troublemakers and had no reason to randomly get into a fight with colleagues. The group was left momentarily stunned, the collective realization hanging in the air with a sharp note of confusion. The sudden tension snapped, causing an outburst of pure exasperation directed at someone nearby. Just as the frustration peaked, a desperate call followed, acknowledging the presence of one who had been overlooked until that moment. The emotional wave of exasperation and desperate acknowledgement from the moments before slowly subsided, leaving behind a charged silence. Yet, that stillness was quickly broken by a voice ringing out with palpable skepticism. A challenge drifted across the scene, questioning whether an action performed entirely on one side could legitimately be classified within the rules of fighting. The questioning of the rules only fueled the fire. With sheer incredulity, one voice dismissed any reference to a lord's decree as utterly laughable. The rage swelled into outright accusation, railing against the use of what was described merely as a pathetic lie to strike at his head. The confrontation reached a fever pitch, yet it was momentarily suspended by an undeniable escalating beat. A single count echoed through the tension-filled air. 1. The moment felt charged, indicating that whatever conflict had erupted was now counting down to its inevitable climax. Just as the tension seemed ready to snap, a voice intervened, attempting to de-escalate the martial tension by cautioning the captain that an honorary monk should not get involved in such petty squabbles. The man addressed found comfort in this social role, briefly acknowledging his unique status and admitting, in fact, that he was indeed an honorary monk. The moment the monk confirmed his unique status, the atmosphere snapped into outright hostility. A cold challenge hung in the air when one opponent questioned if the other had grown fearful now that they were standing face to face. The tension escalated as another figure launched a vicious verbal assault, aggressively reminding the man of his place and dismissing him outright as nothing more than a lowly guard. The ensuing standoff reached its peak, broken only by a measured countdown. A simple word announced the final step of the imminent confrontation. After the final announcement, a profound silence fell over the battlefield. The air, which had been thick with tension and impending chaos, suddenly seemed to crystallize, demanding that everyone confront the stark reality of the moment. A chilling realization broke the silence. The combatants exchanged worried glances, a consensus forming that what they were about to witness was not merely a battle. They collectively recognized the immense imbalance of power unfolding before them. It became clear that the conflict was far beyond a mere fight. It felt less like a true confrontation and more like a devastating, one-sided demolition. The disbelief only deepened when an individual questioned what had happened to equilibrium, what had been done with two. The lingering shock over the loss of equilibrium and what was done with two left them reeling. The sheer violence had been so disproportionate that one person voiced outright disbelief, questioning how a massive, one-sided knockdown could possibly be acceptable. Before the deep concern could sink in, another figure rushed forward, attempting to dismiss the worry with practiced reassurance. However, a final voice cut through the tension, bringing focus back to themselves by reminding everyone of their station and title as an honorary monk. A moment of stunned silence descended upon the scene. The echo of their words hung heavy in the air, forcing all involved to grapple with the implications of the brutal confrontation they had just witnessed. Following the palpable tension of that brutal confrontation, a sharp voice finally broke the heavy silence, questioning if anyone was conscious. The character struggled to focus, the sudden realization washing over them they had been rendered completely unconscious. An immediate assessment followed, recognizing the potent strength of the man they had just faced. The thought quickly dismisses his current status, suggesting that someone with such capability should never occupy the rank of a guard captain. The argument rapidly escalated. One individual noted that the man's combat prowess was enough to secure him a respectable position, perhaps even as a noble's private soldier. However, this praise quickly turned into an uncomfortable defense. They claimed it wasn't a sign of personal weakness, but rather proof of the opponent's sheer strength. This rebuttal culminated in a sharp accusation, pointing out that making excuses after being struck with such force was unacceptable. To conclude the heated exchange, a new voice offered a clear introduction. The speaker identified themselves as Kel, stating their affiliation with the Outer Guards team, signaling that this confrontation was about to become an official matter. As the official tone set by the Outer Guards group hung heavy in the air, a new voice entered the conversation. A man named Gelheim stepped forward and introduced himself. He offered an apology for his prior misconduct, attributing the troubling behavior to being under the influence of alcohol. But the tension did not dissipate, shifting instead to a peculiar concern. One character questioned repeatedly why another figure persisted in certain actions. When given an explanation, that figure maintained that the constant behavior was actually intended as some sort of detection technique. This justification, however, was met with immediate skepticism. Someone countered by stating that the actions looked less like a serious method of detection and more like an unnecessary form of stress relief, prompting the figure who spoke to react with audible surprise at the commentary. Suddenly, the entire argument exploded into high drama. An individual roared out a fiery accusation, challenging another for the audacity of striking at what they considered the head of a demon. This dramatic challenge was answered by an equally venomous counterattack, bitterly labeling their opponent a base and vile human being. The sheer intensity of their accusations and the volatile clash suddenly gave way to a breathless gasp of shock. A realization spread through the group as one individual cried out, astonished that the feat had actually worked. They had managed, against all odds, to unmask a powerful demon right before their eyes. This startling success immediately sparked doubt. Was the demon actually truly exposed? The lingering questions led to an even more disheartening conclusion. Perhaps all of their vicious combat had never been anything more than a pointless skirmish, a simple display of raw power for its own sake. The scale of the threat was further minimized when it became clear that the demon they had successfully captured was nothing more than a minor, insignificant creature. Just when such a false sense of security settled over the castle, shattering whispers arrived. Only 1 week had passed since that meager encounter when reports emerged another demon was attempting to breach the very walls of the stronghold. The magnitude of this new threat instantly overwhelmed them, throwing the entire great hall into a suffocating state of extreme urgency. But even in the wake of that overwhelming emergency, time always carries a weight of its own. The narrative shifts dramatically, moving back to recall a specific and monumental point, the day when Aaron lived through an event that would change everything. On this significant day, the immense gathering began. The halls echoed with purpose, drawing together the most powerful and influential individuals from all corners of Kassadek into one single location. The air thickened with anticipation, the weight of history pressing down upon everyone gathered. Every gaze was fixed on a central point, waiting for an unfolding destiny that few dared to predict. As the tension reached its peak, a sudden ripple of disturbance cut through the collected energy. The whispers were not merely background noise, they signaled the beginning of an irreversible shift in fortune. The atmosphere shattered completely with a sharp cry, followed by an impossible realization. Amidst the danger and chaos, one person found themselves experiencing a bizarre sense of pity even for the creature they were facing. The strange sense of pity, an impossible feeling born amidst the chaos and danger, hung heavy in the air. It was a profound realization that momentarily suspended the tension. Just as that sense of despair settled, the atmosphere abruptly shifted. A loud, cheerful greeting broke the silence, overflowing with over-the-top compliments. The voice celebrated the individual's return and praised them for completing yet another strenuous day's work. Even adding a layer of meticulous care, they inquired if a bath would be desirable first. However, the sugary facade shattered quickly. A sharp question cut through the pleasant atmosphere, addressing a figure and questioning their presence in that specific location. The conversation then moved into matters of duty and responsibility. One character commanded that others tend to the hall, declaring they were managing the current situation themselves. The speaker continued by recalling how Dylan repeatedly came back with apologies, prompting them to ask him for help only if he genuinely wished to reconcile their relationship. The weighty discussions about duty and reconciliation eventually settled, allowing the atmosphere to shift. The location itself seemed alive. The inn had become surprisingly busy lately. The good spirits were punctuated by appreciative cheers, especially those directed toward the wonderfully ice-cold beer. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, serving as a temporary curtain over their deeper concerns. They agreed that nothing could compare to the refreshing taste of an ice-cold beer. The sheer volume of patrons confirmed how spectacularly well business was booming. However, the conversation soon drifted from simple pleasures. The group shifted their focus to a different kind of value, specifically praising the immense talent of one person, while lamenting it was such a waste keeping them merely housed in a refrigerator. They reminded each other that magic books were rare and incredibly pricey goods. Building on their discussion of rare and priceless magic books and incredible talent that was being wasted, the atmosphere shifted as someone suddenly proposed a massive improvement, suggesting that perhaps it was time for an upgrade. The startling suggestion hung heavily in the air, forcing everyone to pause and contemplate the depth of what they had just revealed. For a long moment, the weight of that conversation settled over the group, leaving them immersed in deep thought about the future. However, their profound contemplation was abruptly shattered. A loud exclamation broke the silence, pointing out that the wagon beneath them had begun to shake violently. The sudden, jarring tremor of the wagon seemed to shake the air itself. In the wake of that frightening disturbance, a sharp, warning shout echoed through the space, instantly silencing any potential mischief and reminding them harshly about their need for immediate discipline before they reached the castle's safety. With the immediate threat having passed, a palpable wave of exasperation settled over the group. A deep sigh escaped, questioning the necessity and sheer effort required to travel all the way to this remote countryside simply to find one individual. The frustration was aimed at their boss's overwhelming dedication, acknowledging his known tendency to grasp onto objectives with an almost obsessive tenacity. But that murmur of complaint was abruptly silenced by a crisp, unwavering voice. The realization dawned that the boss's orders were absolute law and required immediate adherence to silence and composure. A specific warning was issued, aimed pointedly at Jacob, who was told once again to be exceptionally cautious with both his words and any rash actions he might attempt. The air, previously weighted by caution and unspoken commands, snapped with sudden unrest. One voice sharply reminded them that they were nowhere near Karzan, followed immediately by another, less controlled exclamation of annoyance. The escalating tension found a momentary pause when someone softly called out to Levi, attempting to re-establish focus amidst the lingering heat of their confrontation. A breath of worried realization drifted through the group. While acknowledging that they had taken certain items out of immediate necessity and defense, there was a shared knot of dread regarding what might happen if those materials were discovered during a formal inspection at the gate, a danger that could put them all in jeopardy. Despite the rising worry, one person attempted to calm their companions, assuring them that everything would be fine. They dismissed the Kassatic inspection as merely a formality and suggested that simply offering up some silver would be enough to guarantee passage, a solution that promised ease but masked an underlying deception. Still wary of the smooth deception, they had been presented with the promise that mere silver could quell all concerns about their passage. Their immediate focus shifted entirely to finding refuge. They began moving toward the massive gates, quickly voicing plans to gain entry into the castle, believing that once inside those walls, they would finally be safe. The urgency was palpable. They wanted nothing more than to drop off whatever business they had and leave immediately. The moment of entry provided a brief, suspended breath. The high tension from their travels lingered around them like dust. However, the tense journey was abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice. An immediate wave of recognition washed over them as they saw someone they hadn't seen in ages. There were greetings exchanged, marking the span of time. It seemed it had been nearly half a year since this person had last visited the area. The reunion was filled with laughter and lightheartedness, until one individual confessed that their prolonged absence was due to falling ill with a fever, forcing them to take a necessary break from work. However, the warmth of their reunion was suddenly disrupted by a sharp intake of breath. An immediate realization dawned as they noticed 5 distinct guards, raising questions about why so many were present when only 2 should have been stationed there. Despite the overwhelming number, a wave of collective relief washed over them because one specific roguish guard remained conspicuously absent from the assembly. The tense atmosphere softened slightly as one person offered thanks for hard labor and presented a gift of silver. The recipient accepted the gratitude with quiet acknowledgement, concluding the exchange by directing them to move right through the area. The moment of passage was cut short by a sudden, urgent call-out that captured everyone's attention, directing their focus towards an individual known as Boss Pool. The unfolding scene revealed 3 additional soldiers standing nearby, escalating the required effort. A discussion immediately followed about the necessity of sharing vital supplies with this expanded group, quickly culminating in a pressing complaint that someone needed to significantly increase their payment. The intense argument, which had centered on increasing payments for the expanded group, immediately hit a wall of disbelief. A shocked exclamation ripped through the air as one party challenged the proposed fees. Despite the high tension and demand for more resources, another character firmly maintained that the fee set was perfectly fair, leading to an impasse built purely on mistrust. Attempting to diffuse the mounting financial tension, someone quickly offered to provide more funds. However, this offer was immediately undercut by a stammered retraction of that generosity, suggesting that the overcompensation was actually unnecessary and perhaps even detrimental to their current situation. But before the dispute could continue, a sudden, urgent warning pierced through the negotiation. The realization struck them that stopping in that place would be deadly. They were unaware of the volatile thugs waiting just behind their current position. Understanding the grave danger, their focus instantly snapped from finances to survival. They realized that escaping and getting inside the castle was now the absolute priority at all costs. The desperate struggle for escape and safety dominated their every thought. Amid the frantic pace, a sudden ripple of questioning cut through the tense atmosphere. Someone called out to the captain, while another responded in sheer confusion, momentarily pulling focus from their immediate peril. However, the momentary lapse in focus was quickly overshadowed by a professional shift. Following the defeat of what they perceived as a demon, Chief Williams swiftly signaled that the existing inspection protocols were set to undergo a drastic and immediate change. The new instructions were chillingly clear. Every single individual carried within the wagons was now required to dismount and undergo a thorough search. This wasn't merely curiosity, it was a sudden, systemic change in their fate. The tension ratcheted up further, as they were warned that the search was not benign. If any person proved to be suspicious, a hidden threat or piece of evidence discovered, the consequences would follow swiftly and violently. And the consequence, they were informed with chilling finality, was immediate brutality. The penalty for suspicion would be nothing less than being struck repeatedly and forcefully with a wooden club. The chilling words of judgment, the brutal consequence of mere suspicion, hung heavy and absolute in the air, demanding immediate compliance. However, this grim decree was immediately met with audible disbelief. One person questioned the entire premise, finding it ridiculous that an inspection should involve beating people simply because they appeared suspicious. The protest quickly shifted focus, turning to confront whoever had instigated such a cruel overreaction. The indignation grew louder. The speaker questioned the reality of the situation, pointing out that what had transpired was nothing more than manual physical contact. One character then lamented the sheer frustration of being forced to watch such an absurdity unfold. A profound sense of intellectual exasperation marked their words, as they dismissed the actions of those involved as merely uncivilized medieval foolishness. Just as the argument reached a peak of intellectual exasperation, dismissively labeling the actions before them as nothing more than uncivilized foolishness, an abrupt and terrifying cry tore through the air. A frantic warning was suddenly shouted out, followed by desperate accusations these individuals were demons. The immediate warning acted like a physical blow, silencing the critical debates and replacing philosophical disdain with sheer, unadulterated terror. Every eye snapped toward the source of the commotion, searching for the tangible threat implied by the alarming cries. A wave of palpable menace washed over the group. The sudden realization that they were not merely dealing with foolish nobles, but something far older and more dangerous, made the air feel thick and brittle around them. Panic began to settle over the crowd, a collective breath held in anticipation. The danger was no longer theoretical, it manifested as an overwhelming, inescapable presence that loomed just beyond sight. The intensity of the situation ratcheted up to a boiling point. The sheer weight of what they now faced, the unknown, the monstrous, the demonic, settled over them like a death shroud, leaving every character momentarily frozen in absolute dread. What kind of force could possess this much terrible power? And how close were they, waiting only for the first devastating move? The overwhelming dread they felt was abruptly shattered by pure adrenaline. A desperate cry rang out as the remaining members of their team launched themselves forward, aggressively taking down all the suspicious individuals surrounding them. The dust settled slowly over the chaotic scene, leaving only spent breath and the echoes of their brutal skirmish. Despite their efforts, Jake was barely conscious, having simply fainted. Yet even amidst the setback, a flicker of resolve ignited among them. While admitting that the mission hadn't failed entirely, one character gently took charge, suggesting that they were departing and entrusting the remaining weight to Jake. A new, urgent directive was immediately established: the gate checkpoint needed to descend into utter chaos. As the leader announced their immediate departure, another character pressed for clarification, asking where precisely they were headed next. Despite the chaos that erupted at the checkpoint and the urgent questions regarding their next steps, the immediate focus shifted drastically. The only priority now seemed to be upgrading a simple piece of equipment, the mini fridge. But just as the discussion of equipment was wrapping up, a new mandate cut through the noise. There was an absolute necessity to bring that specific child directly to the boss. Following the absolute mandate to bring that specific child directly to the boss, a palpable tension gripped the air. Every step felt heavy with unseen pressure, and the mission's focus narrowed solely on reaching their destination. The group moved with practiced urgency, the previous discussion of equipment and planning dissolving into pure necessity. There was no time for hesitation. They were guided by a singular, urgent objective. It was during this pressurized movement that a voice suddenly cut through the background noise, calling out to Kanu and directing them closer. The focus tightened on one person's location. The recognition hit instantly, a gasp of realization echoing the name Kana. To confirm it, someone addressed the person with measured certainty, acknowledging that they had found their target. The sudden realization of the target's identity did little to quell the pressure, and an immediate demand followed. What precise magical capabilities could they boast? Responding with a noticeable hesitation, they listed their abilities, naming dice magic, chilling spells, and even the power to see through physical objects. A skeptical voice quickly chipped in, suggesting that such diverse skills might have been learned from a reckless gambler. The individual shot back with defiance, explaining that the source of their unique gifts was indeed a man who understood how to truly live on the edge. A moment of tense silence fell over the exchange. The accusations hung in the air, leaving everyone breathless and waiting for the next move. Panicked by the skepticism, they quickly found their voice, arguing that despite any doubts about their training, they had been told they learned everything incredibly fast. With a desperate conviction, they asserted their inherent talent for mastering anything they focused on. Despite the charged moment of asserting their inherent talent for mastering anything they focused on, the dramatic high of the conversation abruptly dissolved into the mundane. Hannah spoke up, diverting attention entirely by announcing her surprisingly deep skill in washing dishes. This sudden shift prompted a question about the very nature of their abilities, leaving others wondering how such potent magic could possibly be learned. The questioner challenged the source of their knowledge, suggesting such inquiries were misplaced given a perceived lack of intelligence. In response, they deflected the criticism by admitting that their behavior stemmed from desperation. They quickly escalated their defense, asserting that being smarter than others was an understatement. They were nothing short of geniuses. The escalating tension finally caused the atmosphere to break, leading someone to plead desperately that they should not be abandoned. Upon hearing the word abandoned, another voice reacted instantly, cautioning that such things should not be spoken, as they would only cause further misunderstanding. While attempting to smooth over this emotional moment, however, the conversation was quickly steered back to motivation, confirming that the person in question harbored an undeniable desire to learn and master even more magic. The weight of the previous conversation, the endless pursuit of knowledge and mastery, suddenly shattered, replaced by raw desperation. A sharp refusal burst forth, quickly followed by a frantic plea for direction. The individual needed guidance, begging to know exactly what steps they were required to take. The atmosphere remained thick with panic. A call, desperate and choked with fear, ripped through the silence, directing all attention to a single figure, the boss. But before any answer could be given, the figure holding all the answers paused. They began by acknowledging that there was something more to say, trailing off with a hesitant murmur. It suggested the existence of a critical piece of information, a secret detail they had kept hidden until this very moment, leaving everything hanging in an agonizing question mark. The moment stretched, weighted by the secrets they had withheld. The figure seemed to swallow their words, their attempt at speech beginning as a faint, stuttering utterance that trailed off, making it clear that whatever truth was coming would be difficult, if not painful, to reveal. The hesitation quickly spiraled, the character struggling to even form syllables. The soft murmur intensified into a series of broken attempts at speech, before exploding into an incredibly loud, panicked cry, signaling that the gravity of the situation had just drastically escalated. The voice, though ragged with panic, managed to deliver a shocking update. There was catastrophic bad news. The gathered group of individuals they had worked so hard to round up had vanished. All the captive members had managed a complete escape. The shocking announcement of the mass escape had barely settled when a new, even more unbelievable detail was revealed. One prisoner somehow managed to tear through his wooden shackles completely unarmed, not during the interrogation sessions, but while they were still restrained by armed guards. The revelation was staggering, compounded by the fact that another individual had boasted about knocking them unconscious and dumping their bodies into the dungeon. This truth immediately threw the group into turmoil. One person cried out in distress over the catastrophe, demanding to know what course of action they should take next. However, facing the chaos, a chilling response emerged, dismissively stating a complete lack of knowledge regarding the situation, and making it clear that the fate of those responsible genuinely did not concern them. The momentary shock and ensuing chaos of the revelation vanished, replaced by a harsh return to disciplined urgency. Authority figures immediately began issuing clear operational mandates. All guard captains were ordered to assemble at the headquarters without delay. Simultaneously, a warning was issued regarding safety, directing one individual, named Hannah, to ensure that all the doors were locked tight against unknown dangers. The focus then shifted into strategy, with discussions centering on Kanukin's unique abilities. It was mentioned that because he could see through solid objects, he would be able to check and identify any individual who might attack or threaten them from a hidden vantage point. After concluding these protective measures, the group exchanged excited farewells, promising to reunite soon under the guidance of their boss. With strategic preparations underway, the sense of mission pulled them forward. The urgency of their objective eclipsed any lingering sentiment or moment for rest. As the journey continued and their path narrowed, an undeniable tension settled over them. Every glance exchanged, every hushed instruction, suggested that they were hurtling toward a confrontation far more dangerous than anything faced thus far. A powerful adversary was drawing closer. The rising tension and anticipation finally shattered, giving way to raw exasperation. An outburst broke through the controlled atmosphere as someone loudly exclaimed about a bunch of fools. Unable to process the staggering reality, how could they have allowed the prisoners to escape? The heated accusations soon gave way to a tense debate regarding resources. A proposal was made to switch their current restraints to steel shackles, based on the observation that the Byzantine castle exclusively utilized such materials. However, this suggestion was immediately met with sharp rebuke, challenging the right of the speaker to advise such changes, and forcefully reminding everyone that one single steel shackle represented significant expense compared to 50 wooden ones. Despite the chaos and argument, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over them. It appeared their plan had succeeded. The prisoners truly did not wish to remain confined. This certainty was fueled by a revelation: the escapees possessed something critical that they were desperate to keep hidden, thanks to the fact that one of the initial men who managed to break free had been meticulously researched. Building on the realization that their escape was due to deep, meticulous research, the conversation turned to influential figures. They whispered about a man known in Karzan as the Man of Solutions, noting how he was reputed to be an even more notorious character in those circles. Another voice interjected, questioning how such a cunning man managed to capture someone of that caliber, attributing it merely to luck. The commentary quickly escalated into cruel jabs about the captive's appearance, calling him a whimpering fool. The mockery suddenly hit an immediate roadblock. A commanding voice cut through the chatter, demanding everyone halt what they were saying. The attention immediately shifted to the guards surrounding them. One person challenged a group, demanding to know who held the rank of captain among the armed men. Another voice then pierced the tension with pure disdain, directly addressing a specific guard and calling him out as nothing more than a scary-faced brute. The heated confrontation and accusations hung heavy in the air, leaving a palpable tension that threatened to snap at any moment. The verbal assault quickly transitioned into a physical confrontation. An older voice harshly demanded better manners, while the struggling individual pleaded desperately for them to let go, their desperate cries echoing through the chaotic scene. A sharp cry of pain cut through the noise, signaling that the physical struggle had already inflicted deep wounds. Desperation quickly mounted as a distraught plea rose up, insisting that their master had done nothing wrong and begging for immediate rescue. Suddenly, the nature of their capture was revealed. A nearby character explained that Levius had been responsible for bringing in the village villain, a man known to Aaron as a traveling coachman. The truth spilled out. They had taken those individuals because they felt gravely threatened. The revelation that the threat they faced had led them to intervene and detain certain individuals cast a tense shadow over the group. Amidst the lingering tension, one character's voice broke the silence, voicing disdain for Levius, calling him out with derisive language. However, the group quickly countered that sentiment. They argued that even though they had a personal relationship with the individual who had escaped, their duty superseded any familiarity. Letting such an escapee go completely at liberty was not an option for them. The exchange left a brief, charged silence. The weight of their decisions settled over the area. With a collective sigh, they paused to catch their breath. Despite the brief respite, the group noted how relentlessly persistent the surrounding guards were, suggesting that the confrontation was far from over. Suddenly, the tension snapped. A wave of disbelief washed over them as they realized that against their will, they were being taken away. The captive voiced pure anguish at this sudden turn of events, vehemently stating that they had absolutely no intention of breaking free. The overwhelming threat of the Cassatic guards was quickly noted. They weren't playing games. Their enforcement at the checkpoints felt suffocatingly real. The oppressive nature of this world became clear as it was revealed that the opposition knew every rule pertaining to the group, especially those mandates demanding immediate retaliation if a head injury occurred. Observing this adherence to law, one figure wryly dismissed the system's paranoia, suggesting they were overthinking everything. The weight of the guards' persistent presence and the realization of their entrapment hung heavily in the air. Every corner, every shadow seemed to watch them, making escape feel impossible. As the weight of their entrapment settled around them, the sudden blast of a whistle shattered the fragile silence. Panic flared instantly, and commands erupted for everyone to run in a different direction, desperately trying to outrun the suffocating net of watchful eyes. But even as they bolted, a sharp realization struck. The movements of the pursuing force did not align with simple pursuit. There was something far more sinister at play. It became clear that their sudden attempts at flight were nothing more than a diversion. The guards hadn't been chasing them. They had been meticulously luring the heroes into a predetermined trap. Instead of collapsing into fear, defiance flared within the protagonist. Addressing one of the patrolling guards, he challenged the authority and questioning their true identity. With a cynical laugh, he dismissed the notion that even 7 opponents held any advantage over him, turning the threat back into a defiant gauntlet. The protagonist's defiant laughter echoed, turning the predicted danger into a challenge. The unexpected shift in power leaves the surrounding opponents momentarily speechless. One sharp exclamation punctuates the profound shock sweeping through them. The charged silence that follows is almost deafening. Every member of the hostile group holds their breath, struggling to process the magnitude of his sudden change in demeanor. The atmosphere hangs heavy and expectant, the seconds seeming to slow down time itself, amplifying the immense tension building between the two opposing sides. Just as the expected confrontation seems inevitable, a distinct break occurs. A warning call is issued, halting the momentum entirely. The opponents begin to murmur amongst themselves, realizing that the nature of their confrontation may be something far more daunting than they initially believed. The heavy, uncertain atmosphere lingers after the realization of their predicament. Just as murmurs of doubt begin to settle among the opponents, A sudden, sharp declaration rips through the air, bringing all attention to a figure with Roguish bearing Aaron. The sudden appearance is instantly overshadowed by a raw wave of fury. A destructive promise rings out, painting the air with the clear intent to strike down one opponent. The confrontation explodes into a breathtaking spiral of combat. Momentum dictates that the ensuing clash is brutal and overwhelming, leaving the characters caught in the dizzying vortex of violence. But even amidst the chaos, the fate of this entire ordeal remains suspended, hanging on a single, desperate breath. Just as the overwhelming spiral of combat reaches its absolute zenith, a sudden, inexplicable pause descends. The air itself seems to seize up, and all movement halts, forcing every character caught in the vortex of violence to momentarily inhale, realizing that the fate of this confrontation hangs suspended on nothing but a single, desperate breath. In this fragile vacuum of time, the sheer exhaustion and shock begin to set in. The adrenaline that fueled the earlier clash drains away rapidly, leaving a palpable tension thick enough to choke on. Every surviving character is left in a precarious state, too close to move, yet too afraid to remain still. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by a panicked whisper. The struggle to hold back emotion surfaces in a faltering attempt to stop everything. That quickly escalates into a desperate cry, warning that no one should dare approach or come near, demanding an immediate halt to the bloodshed. But the gravity of the warning was violently broken. A sharp, desperate cry of anguish shattered the strained quiet, signaling that something immediate and urgent had occurred in the wake of the danger. The commotion drew the attention of two figures who immediately questioned the source of the chaos. They scoffed loudly, accusing the person responsible for the noise of generating far too much trouble, particularly recalling a hasty escape from the depths of a dungeon. One of them then offered a surprising counterpoint, revealing that the subject of their concern had an apprentice who was actually looking for them. Before the discussion could delve deeper into the matter of the apprentice, a series of abrupt exclamations and sharp cries suddenly burst forth, completely changing the focus of everyone present. The sudden attention quickly converged on a specific individual, who was immediately and clearly identified as Aaron, the guard captain. Examining him closely, the observer noted that he appeared rough around the edges, even resorting to unnecessary violence sometimes. Yet, within their own mind, a crucial shift occurred. They decided that perhaps such superficial habits should not be used as grounds for judging his true character. Still reflecting on the shift in judgment, the understanding that superficial habits should not define a man's true worth, the conversation abruptly pivoted. An urgent query was posed: had they managed to pinpoint the location of the individual linked to solutions? The question hung heavy in the air, met only with a slow, thoughtful hum. The necessary piece of intelligence soon dropped. He had learned through rumors that the target was currently taking refuge within Sector 5. The mention of Sector S provoked immediate surprise, yet the discussion quickly narrowed its focus, establishing a vital landmark. Hannah's Inn was housed within that precise sector. An unmistakable sense of urgency settled over them. They had to proceed without delay. The air seemed to grow heavier, the focus sharpening around the goal they had just acquired. Every glance, every movement was suddenly weighted with purpose. With the location set and the stakes elevated, they began their swift descent towards Sector 5. The path to finding solutions was narrow, dangerous, and drawing them closer to an inevitable confrontation. The trio continued their descent towards Sector 5, the narrow and dangerous path serving only to heighten the tension. Every step felt calculated as they drew closer to the source of solutions, finally reaching a spot where their confrontation seemed unavoidable. Suddenly, the searching stops. A triumphant shout pierces the tense air as they spot what they were looking for. The target is right there. The immediate realization sparks a powerful surge of rage among them, and the collective impulse becomes an intense demand that the person be utterly dismantled. However, just as their assault is about to begin, a measured but absolute voice cuts through the chaos. This authoritative figure raises a hand, interrupting them all, declaring that they cannot simply let a criminal operate freely within this area without official clearance. Following the sudden stop of the assault, a voice echoes with undeniable weight, cutting through the chaotic standoff. This individual makes an emphatic proclamation, revealing himself and declaring his name to all present. He is Scar. The intensity escalates immediately. With a second, even more dramatic burst of power, he throws out another resonant declaration, calling forth the ominous and imposing presence of the shadow of Kassadik. The weight of these claims settles over the battlefield like an oppressive blanket. The sheer presence of this newcomer is overwhelming, making the previous tension palpable. Every action and every breath in the area seem to pause under the gravity of his authority. The dramatic build-up and the weight of his identity prove too much for someone nearby. A sudden, guttural cry erupts, signaling pain and defeat, as if this newly manifested power has already struck an unfortunate target. The lingering shock of the pain causes momentary disorientation, forcing them to gasp. Confusion washes over their faces as they struggle to process the sudden outburst. Their attention quickly snaps toward a particular figure, pointing out someone whose presence commands immediate focus. The momentary chaos gives way to a sharp realization. They quickly gauge the threat, recognizing that the individual they are observing possesses truly tremendous and overwhelming strength. However, the urgency of the moment shifts. Their conversation pivots entirely, indicating that they are on a specific mission. They are actively looking for someone described only by her distinct violet hair. They urgently ask if anyone has seen her. The desperate inquiry hung heavy in the air, replacing the previous thread of conversation with a suffocating silence. The group stood suspended in the moment, their intense focus narrowing solely onto any potential answer for the girl with the distinctive violet hair. Every pair of eyes scanned the surrounding area, awaiting any glimpse or whisper that might guide them to her elusive whereabouts. The intense search continued, every shadow and whisper scrutinized under the weight of their collective worry. The silence, which had been a suffocating blanket moments before, suddenly began to warp, taut with unspoken dread. It was as if the sheer concentration of their desire found only deep, unsettled quiet in response. Just when they were beginning to feel the edge of exhaustion, a sharp sound shattered the stillness. A muffled cry, raw and strained, ripped through the air, an abrupt exclamation that instantly drew every head toward its source. The sound was enough to halt all movement, pulling the focus of the entire group away from their search and toward whatever had caused that sudden distress. An immediate wave of adrenaline swept over them, replacing the anxiety of waiting with the urgent need to respond. The sheer force of the sound had done its work, instantly snapping them out of their search efforts. Every muscle was coiled, every member of the group hyper-aware, completely focused on the direction from which the disturbance originated. An immediate, volatile surge of adrenaline washed over them. The earlier creeping anxiety was violently replaced by the primal, undeniable need for rapid response and survival. In the sudden, frantic moment of realization, a gasp escaped one of them. The air was ripped with an anguished shout, calling out the name Dylan, signaling that whatever they had heard or seen meant something terrifyingly personal. The situation demanded nothing less than immediate flight. A sharp, urgent command cut through the tension, a piercing cry of warning that forced every single person to turn tail and run. The urgent scramble of flight had to abruptly halt. Facing the reality before them, the sheer terror morphed into desperate panic. They realized that being 3 men against whatever force loomed was an impossible gamble. Confirming their deepest fear, this entire fight was utterly hopeless. Even as the overwhelming odds threatened to crush them, a primal instinct surfaced. Despite the dread and the clear path toward tragedy, there was an absolute will remaining a desperate desire simply to survive. That raw determination finally fueled action. A sharp, defiant shout pierced the tense silence, directing a challenge toward a massive figure nearby, signaling that this impossible fight was not over yet. But the challenger was not finished with words. With an undeniable smirk, they spat out a taunt of defiance, reminding their opponent that they had once dealt a devastating defeat. The momentum only built. The words flowed, listing off the vanquished comrades and dismissing the opponent as nothing more than a weakling who had collapsed mere moments ago after the slightest tap to the head. The air crackled with the weight of their boasts, filling the space between them with nothing but aggressive tension. The verbal barrage finally snapped the calm. A sudden, sharp cry tore through the tension, signaling that the flow of words had been abruptly cut short by physical impact. The echoing impact of the blow lingered in the air, leaving a ringing silence to fill the void where words had just been flung. The sudden disruption seemed to freeze time, allowing the sheer physical force of the moment to settle before anything could be said or done. A ragged breath escaped the man, followed by a frustrated groan of pain. His mind immediately jumped to who was responsible, railing against the invisible presence that always seemed to materialize just to torment him. He voiced his profound annoyance at being continually ambushed, as if fate determined that he could never escape trouble. The sudden surge of anger subsided into a focused, desperate rage. He took another deep breath, preparing to unleash his fury on someone who was perhaps more vital than the opponent he had just been grappling with. The outburst was a raw scream of accusation, directed squarely at Aaron. His voice conveyed pure disbelief and blistering anger, demanding to know why this person always managed to be absent, why he would never appear when their help was most critically needed. The accusing words hung heavy in the air, leaving a vacuum of silence where raw emotion had just resided. Every breath felt labored, every shadow stretched out, amplifying the deep weight of betrayal and unanswerable questions. The world seemed to pause at that devastating moment, every character caught in the echo of the previous confrontation. The tension built rapidly, taut and suffocating, promising a clash or a profound revelation. As the silence finally broke, a shift in atmosphere became palpable. A crucial realization dawned among those present, setting the stage for an unavoidable confrontation that neither party was ready to face. The air, thick with the weight of realization from moments before, seemed to press down on everyone present. All that had been building, the subtle tension and profound understanding of their unavoidable confrontation, coalesced into a single, electric silence. The strained quiet was violently ruptured by a single, scathing syllable. A dismissive moniker, aimed directly at one of the figures involved, cutting through the atmosphere like a shard of glass. The target of the insult did not merely absorb the blow, they challenged it, demanding a repetition of the jab. As if their dignity was on the line, they echoed the vile words back, transforming the initial taunt into a barrage of profound contempt. The vicious exchange left the remaining characters hanging in a stunned moment, allowing the full force of the accumulated hostility to wash over them all. But the escalating drama was suddenly interrupted by a voice filled with detached observation. The speaker wondered aloud how the target possessed such exceptional hearing, noting that they were anything but out of commission. A casual laugh followed, dripping with derision as the observer challenged the man, asking if he truly believed himself to be merely playing dead. The observer's laughter slowly faded, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. They watched the protagonist with an air of detached superiority, their words hanging heavy with derision. It was clear that these opponents were making poor decisions, walking into a trap set by confidence and escalating drama. A mocking wave of disdain swept over the speaker as they observed the approaching figures. They dismissed the oncoming crowd, deeming them imbeciles who wandered left and right, all too eager to meet a grim end. The speaker's gaze then sharpened, fixing on a specific target. They questioned the individual about their connection to the protagonist, asking if they were the one responsible for beating up the kid. This was followed by an even more dismissive comment, suggesting that person had found a comfortable place. The taunts did not cease, continuing as the speaker once again focused their mocking attention on the target's physique. They pointed out obvious flaws and remaining fragments of wood visible along that side, ensuring every insult was perfectly calibrated to erode any lingering sense of self-worth. The sustained torrent of insults hung in the air, leaving a wake of deep resentment. The emotional pressure built until it felt unbearable, forcing an immediate break in the tense atmosphere. The blatant cruelty of the words finally snapped something. A powerful objection erupted, dismissing the severity and depth of the attack with a sharp cry of moral shock. Suddenly, the focus shifted entirely. The truth was delivered in a powerful declaration: one should not aim their hatred at the individual player, but rather turn that focus toward the corrupted system, or game itself. The powerful declaration about redirecting hatred away from the individual players and toward the corrupted system echoed through the vast space, leaving everyone momentarily suspended in the weight of that revelation. A slow realization dawned on all present: the battle was never meant to be fought against blood rivals, but against the very foundation upon which this world operated. The gravity of the truth settles heavily, painting a picture far grander and more devastating than anyone had anticipated. It was clear that to dismantle this malicious structure required not just brute strength, but profound insight and understanding of its deepest vulnerabilities. The scope of the conspiracy proved nearly insurmountable. Faces etched with a mixture of horror and desperate resolve exchanged silent glances. The moment demanded that the characters move past shock and identify the precise point of collapse within the system. They understood that every piece of evidence, every flaw in the design, held the key to freedom. With that shared understanding solidifying into ironclad determination, They knew the time for caution was over. A collective will built upon shared despair and righteous anger began to coalesce, gathering force until it manifested as an undeniable purpose if the system itself was the enemy. Then every remaining resource would be thrown against its core weakness. The immense weight of realizing the system was truly the enemy that every resource must be thrown against its core weakness had barely settled, when a sharp, vicious whisper pierced the tension. The accusation immediately targeted the perceived weakest link, asking how someone as seemingly vulnerable could have been so utterly undone by such calculating, deceitful people. The conversation quickly shifted into a sterile interrogation. They questioned the very reason for the visitor's presence in their peaceful neighborhood, immediately dismissing any notion that the person might simply be seeking to settle down as an ordinary resident. The refusal was absolute, declaring there was no room available for them. But amidst the cold dismissal and closed doors, a singular voice cut through the tense atmosphere. The speaker made a brief, undeniable declaration that they were looking for someone. The attention immediately shifted to a visual description: a small girl with captivating violet hair. The urgency in the voice grew palpable as the speaker desperately asked if anyone had seen her, leaving the outcome of their search hanging suspended on the edge of discovery. The desperate search for the small girl with violet hair concluded, leaving a strained silence hanging over the group. The sudden hush seemed to shift the focus away from their loss and towards the individuals gathered around them. The tension thickened in the air, every breath seeming loaded with unspoken meaning. The silence was not peaceful. It felt like a coiled spring, waiting for the inevitable snap of revelation. A deep current of suspicion began to run through the conversation. The speaker questioned why such a powerful man of solutions would be sent for someone so seemingly unskilled, an untrained mage like her. Their thoughts gravitated toward an understanding whoever orchestrated this must possess immense and careful resources. The realization of this manipulation hung heavy in the air, acknowledged by one party who simply stated that the listener already knew the truth. The conversation immediately escalated as a cold threat followed: reveal her location, and the life of someone would be spared. The weight of the unspoken threat pressed down on them all, creating a critical point where escape seemed impossible and confrontation was unavoidable. The ultimate answer, the fate of the mysterious girl, now depended entirely on what came next. The atmosphere, already thick with unspoken dread, suddenly compresses. Every breath feels heavy, holding the weight of monumental choices that loom before them. The silence stretches, a taut wire vibrating with potential conflict. The characters brace themselves for the inevitable collision, the moment when fate finally demands a reckoning. Then the stillness shatters. A piercing voice rings out, an exclamatory burst of frustration directed at someone who seems to be a recurring antagonist in their lives, marking them with disbelief and exasperation. The initial outburst quickly darkens into a dangerous, chilling declaration. The speaker's intent is stark and absolute. They intend to inflict ultimate harm upon their target, setting the stage for a clash far more violent than anyone could have foreseen. The weight of the ominous declaration settles heavily in the air. The high tension lingers, leaving behind a breathless silence that suggests the confrontation has drained every ounce of dramatic power from the space around them. A ragged sound finally breaks the stillness. It is a drawn-out, weary breath, suggesting that whatever force was at play has taken a visible toll on the character's physical endurance. The sudden dip in tension allows a shockingly mundane thought to surface. The character, having endured the extreme drama moments earlier, finds themselves preoccupied with a simple need, wishing desperately for nothing more than a cold beer. The moment of simple desire hangs in the air, a stark contrast to the life-or-death stakes that had just dominated the scene. It is as if all the grand pronouncements and potential violence have faded into background noise. The lingering fatigue and casual complaint mark a temporary pause. But the question remains: what kind of simple respite will wash away the bitter taste left by such dangerous promises? Any illusion of simple respite quickly shatters. The moment of calm was nothing but a temporary reprieve, for the challenge resurfaced violently. After issuing a bold command demanding a one-on-one, fair fight, the opposition lunged forward with the force of an enraged bull. However, the protagonist's agility was unmatched. They predicted the trajectory of the attack and slipped effortlessly past their charging opponent. The conflict reached a fever pitch when Boss Aaron joined the fray. With blinding speed, the protagonist drove their sword deep into his chest with a sickening thud. Blood erupted in a violent splash. But the attack was not over. They thrust the blade again and again, watching the life force drip slowly to the ground. As the immediate fighting concluded, two new figures appeared on the scene. One voice greeted a companion with respectful address, calling them captain, and the second responded warmly in return, welcoming the stranger as a comrade. After the immediate conclusion of their encounter and the warm exchange between comrades, the newly arrived figure broke the ice with a casual greeting to one companion. The conversation quickly turned, as this character revealed an item that promised to help the other person get much better, prompting an excited gasp of surprise. The unexpected gift was quickly identified, eliciting a dramatic cry of recognition. It was revealed to be something immensely sought after, the pie of death. The presenter maintained a playful enthusiasm, insisting that the recipient must enjoy every last bite, given all the trouble and effort involved in acquiring it. The subject's eyes immediately focused on the quantity of treats. Upon realizing 3 whole pies had been brought along, a question about the supply was posed. However, this initial excitement was quickly curtailed when it became apparent that due to personal restrictions, they could not actually eat any of the delicious bounty. A momentary, shared silence settled over the group. The delicious promise of food and companionship lingered in the air, an unspoken realization that despite the initial warmth of the meeting, a tangible barrier, be it personal or circumstantial, separated them from the full enjoyment they had anticipated. The unspoken barriers between them seemed to momentarily lift, the casual atmosphere broken only by a friendly reminder that there was also a pie intended for the captain. This simple observation immediately elicited an exclaimed sound of surprise and delight from another person. A breath of quiet settled over the group, allowing the momentary exchange to linger in the air. The simple intimacy provided by shared sustenance caused them all to pause, absorbing the unexpected ease before anything else could shift or be said. But this reflective quiet quickly evaporated. The conversation was suddenly hijacked by an intense compliment, with one person lavishly praising the recipient's beauty, describing her as truly lovely. The depth of that gaze and the weight of those words immediately cast a complex shadow over the entire encounter. But the weight of those flattering compliments, casting a complex shadow over the entire encounter, was suddenly shattered. A dramatic declaration echoed through the air: someone had returned. The sudden appearance caused immediate confusion among everyone present. Minutes later, another figure reacted with a surprised exclamation. Receiving something, they expressed thanks. Though their attention quickly diverted to a more immediate concern, the remedy was meant to help them get rid of an unpleasant, fishy taste lingering in their mouth. The surrounding atmosphere held its breath, letting the residue of dialogue and strange gifts settle in a brief moment of quiet anticipation. The focus then shifted as a new voice began to engage the character, initiating a thoughtful inquiry about their deepest desires, what they envisioned for themselves in the future. The questioning became more specific, suggesting roles that spoke of traditional high status. Were they contemplating a life as a knight, or perhaps the refined existence awaiting a noble's wife? After grappling with the spectrum of suggested roles from a proud knight to the refined life awaiting a noble's wife, the protagonist finally seemed to struggle for words. A faint sound, barely above a whisper, betrayed their initial attempts to speak, as if the sheer weight of expectation was keeping their truth locked away. But the hesitation broke, dissolving into a raw, powerful utterance. The words were not about status or title, they were simply a desperate plea, a yearning to live. The raw, undeniable truth of that declaration hung in the air. It was a stark reversal of expectation, transforming any discussion of lineage or power into something much more primal and fragile. The raw, undeniable truth of that declaration, which had left the atmosphere thick with dramatic weight moments before, suddenly dissolves into a startlingly casual exchange. With a simple affirmation, one character signals that everything is accepted, immediately followed by an unexpectedly laid-back commitment to forming a partnership. However, that casual mood doesn't last. The other figure immediately raises a skeptical concern, questioning whether this ambitious new venture will actually be attempted with their full and undivided effort. A heavy, tense silence follows this doubt. The room seems to hold its breath as the weight of their expectations settles over both characters. Breaking the quiet, that single-word effort is spoken. It hangs in the air like a tangible challenge, forcing all involved to confront the genuine measure and commitment required before they can move forward. The weight of the word effort had settled over everyone, an invisible measure demanding absolute commitment before any progress could be made. The tension was palpable, a thick blanket smothering the air. Just as the gravity of their unspoken challenges threatened to fracture the entire scene, a completely unexpected voice broke through the charged silence. It was a casual interruption, drawing attention away from high-stakes confrontation and directing it towards something incredibly mundane and innocent invitation for some juice.